happening, man? What's happening? What's happening?
Bored no more.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? This is the Bored No More Network. Bored No More. What's happening?
Hey, what's going on? Before everyone gets all uppity, this is a non-alcoholic beverage. This is mineral water with a mano-made mix of raw, real, unadulterated cane sugar, lime, and lots of mineral water. There's no alcohol in this. Just to be clear. Although, I've made many references and spoken of my grandfather quite often. And he would have wanted a little slash moonshine up in there. You know what I mean? That's kind of how he would do it. Actually, he'd probably forgo all of that other stuff and just give him straight moonshine. That's just the kind of guy he was. How's everybody doing? Hope everyone's doing well. It is not urine. If your urine looks like this and it's this cloudy, as someone that was a personal trainer for a while, I'll tell you that that's not good. That's not good. Again, if you're just tuning in, there is no alcohol in this. None. Lime juice, lemon, real cane sugar, mineral water, and my face is shaven. This face has been shaved. And it feels naked. Let's say hello to everyone in the chat. My dear brother, Daniel. Daniel, I'm just gonna like say something publicly that, you know, in our private conversations about zines and merch and all that stuff and all that amazing things. The compilation, I'm still waiting on a couple of artists to. It already doesn't make sense to stream. You know what? I'm just gonna stop talking about that. Daniel, I'll send you a message. It's really good news. Pretty cool stuff. I love when Daniel gets bored. He like literally whips off something in 5 seconds that's like, yo, this is incredible. This is sick. So he sent me some ideas for volume 2 of the zine, and it already looks sick. We're talking about the compilation and the artists that'll be on it and song tracks and all that stuff. I almost have a name. I haven't fully come up with one, but I think I'm just going to keep it simple. Just because I think it works so well. And if you recall the Stax Records logo, which maybe I should bring it right up right now. This is quite the stream already. It's not only a jabber stream, it's a nonsense stream. No sense, nonsense. To the point where I'm actually talking to a community member directly through a live stream and making a business call. Directly on a live stream. Who does that? Nobody does that. Should you do that? I don't know. Is that a bad thing? Maybe. I'm going to show you right now publicly, my dear brother Daniel and everybody else that's here. Kind of what I was thinking. I don't particularly enjoy ripping people off at all. I like inspiration over imitation any day of the week. But I purposely wanted to do a shout out of sorts. Also, here, let me show you. Kind of like we did at the back page, we give respect, acknowledgement, and love to Justin Marler, Death to the World, for inspiring the zine. Of course, we should give credit. So everyone knows I like Stax Records. Everyone knows I'm assuming everyone knows I'm Orthodox. And everybody that is Orthodox or Orthodox curious is familiar with this. the meaning of this and why we do our cross this way. So I was thinking we took a variation of Stack Records logo, one of my favorite record labels, a lot of ideas that came from this record label, the whys and all that. I'm also a big fan of a lot of things they did. I agree with, and their logo is one of my favorites because it's the snapping of a finger, as you can obviously see. But I wanted to kind of call it something like Spoon, just call the compilation Spoon, because we have the zine, we call it the Spoon Feed, and then bring that finger down. I've seen this before. That's the only thing I don't like, but I think it does represent what we want to do. And I almost kind of wanted to make it like a holographic thing where it kind of looks like the finger's coming down. The fingers from snapping your finger to it's coming down. There we go. It's been publicly discussed. The discussion was made public. Daniel says, I'll have it done in 20 minutes. He's exaggerating. He'll have it done in 5. My phone will go bzzz in like 2 minutes and boom, there it is. How is everybody doing out there? Let's say hello to everyone in the chats, because I started that and then I stopped when I saw Daniel. So now if anyone's getting jealous, no, I'm just kidding. Hold on. We do things so like barbaric here. I have this fan on my laptop to keep it from exploding. I'm just moving that around. All right, let's say hello to everyone out here. All right, we got Daniel, obviously, is in the house. What's up, brother? Ryan Lopez is in the house. Welcome, my dear friend. It's good to see you back. Germanus is here. I don't know why I kind of half said that like a Skittles. Germanus. Bald face is disgusting. I apologize for the disgusting face I have under the beard. Moldy, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to see you there, sir. Brody is in the house. What's up, Brody? Punchy's here punching them ups. Lots of punches being handed out there. I like that. Punchy has a way of summing things up in a matter of a sentence. Well done, Punchy. Conversations that we've been having in some of our chats, Telegram group or whatever, or Discord, thoughts, ideas, or whatever, she'll sum it up with like a sentence and kind of present it in a like chill manner, but nails it every time. Slow Boy's in the house. What's going down? Slow Boy. The boy is slow. Got to get that whiteboard out. Show them what's up. Pike. What's going down, man? What's up there in the Alaskas? Do you ever have a brush up on your Greek, or is it permanently locked? Oh, interesting question, Moldy. Very good question. Both to answer your question, Moldy. It's pretty ingrained. It was the first language I learned. I learned Greek first. My Greek at one point was ridiculously good, to the point where Greeks in Greece and Canada that were not immigrants, that were immigrants, always thought I was born in Greece. They thought I was an immigrant. So my Greek was pretty good always. But I do have to brush up nowadays. Meaning, like, if I'm around a Greek person, we're talking Greek, it'll just take a few minutes. I might use some English, so therefore the Gringlish will kick in here and there. But let's say if I went to Greece or Cyprus, it'd probably take me about a couple of days to a week to be like fluent again. So I think it's pretty much ingrained in there, but some things I do have to brush up on for sure. Which I'm thinking of doing. Example, when I'm watching a lot of Orthodox content from Greece or Cyprus, like when you hear Metropolitan Neophyton talk, whatever, I understand 99% of what he's saying. It's one of those things where he'll like even use big old school words, and I'll understand the meaning of what's being discussed. But if you ask me specifically to say that, you know what I mean? Yes, my Greek's pretty good. I don't know. I think I answered that question in a fumbled sort of way. Buck says she's efficient with her words. She certainly is, and she summed it up really well in the Discord. One of the reasons why I wanted to even jabber today, or some of the things that have been on my mind this week, has been in preparation for this Lent, this upcoming Lent. So I wanted to start preparing beforehand now. I wanted to start preparing for Lent now. And I remember last year it was a tidal wave of spiritual attacks on a level that was insane. And it's one of the reasons why I think SOS Radio started to kind of take off amongst Orthodox brothers and sisters out there online last year, when we started really taking the SOS Radio a little bit more seriously, and we started doing our thing. It was during Great Lent that we, I think I scratched Manny's laptop. Actually, how could I have? Manny, I think I scratched the top of your laptop. Oh, dude, I should have put something underneath this thing. Anyways, what's up, Denise? My bald face is on camera. Back to it. So, yeah, the spiritual attacks are already starting. It's already hardcore. It's already intense. I'm seeing it publicly with, like, friends and family. I'm seeing it on the news, this and that. And like I've mentioned on the last couple of streams, I was really happy to see that a lot of our Orthodox brothers and sisters out there online specifically have healthier discernment, I think, this time around. I don't know if I'm going to get into some of the things that are on my mind. I don't know if those are going to come up. I didn't prepare anything. I'm not really prepared for anything other than just jabbering. But yeah, so Moldy made a point. She pointed out that it's not even Lent yet, and the spiritual war, she feels like something's coming around the corner. Basically, spiritual warfare is ramping up. It most certainly is, for sure. I think yeah. See, okay. If anyone's got any questions, whatever, to get me started, throw something in the chats, and I'll start rambling off that, because I don't really know how to begin this. Like, okay, so some of the things I was thinking about, like, was one of my first interviews I did when I came back to the study of stuff after like millions of years of being away from it. Meaning, I'd started the study of stuff 2009 and took many years off, and then started sort of putting out content again 2021 around the time. Well, you know, because a lot of people were coming to me about conspiratorial stuff, let's say, because they knew that I had been doing that and talking about that for like 20 odd years. And I was one of those guys bringing up a lot of the subjects that I hear now out there, like a bajillion years ago. You know what I mean? So I decided to start doing a show where I kind of break down some of the questions I was getting asked privately and start talking about them publicly. My very first guest was David Whitehead. David Whitehead, for those that don't know, is a popular online conspiratorial streamer, podcaster, martial artist. He works very tightly with Michael Tessarian. And they do kind of like this podcast called Unslaved from back in the, like, you know. Anyway, everybody already knows my feelings and opinions on that world, the Michael Tessarian world that I came out of, the Jordan Maxwell stuff, all that world. I did learn a lot from that camp, quite a few things, many things that I hear even amongst the Orthodox brothers and sisters out there that are putting out conspiratorial stuff, or have been for a bajillion years. Obviously, someone like Jay Dyer has been ahead of the curve for a very long time. But I always thought to myself, it was funny because Jay Dyer, James Corbett, and Michael Tessarian kind of all have this very encyclopedic knowledge of things that they're that they specialize in. Some of the subjects that they specialize in overlap, actually quite a few, with each other. I predominantly agree with Jay Dyer on like 95% of the things he says. There's very few I'm not exactly in agreement with him on, but there are not many things. And on a lot of the subjects he covers, he just blows me away at at his in-depth knowledge and all of that stuff. James Corbett. Buck had James Corbett on a bajillion years ago. Actually, it was one of the... I'd seen some other of Buck's videos. This is before Orthodoxy. In the past, I can't remember some of their names of the guests. Patrick Wood, I believe. But definitely James Corbett was one of the interviews of Buck's that I first tuned into a million years ago. James Corbett is man. He's definitely one of the early champs of that world for sure, man. He's right up there with Jay for sure, 100%. I would say the only thing that I don't see eye to eye with Mr. Corbett on subjects are his spiritual beliefs. Obviously, I'm Orthodox. Some of the way he views agorism and some of the libertarian subjects. He doesn't consider himself a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist, but sometimes he's put in that camp. He considers himself more of an agorist. He makes a lot of he appeals to Konkin's book, The Agorist Primer, and stuff like that. I know, I'm not sure if anyone even knows what I'm talking about when I'm making these references. For the most part, his worldview, his view on geopolitics, his view on the elites, all of that stuff, I highly agree with Mr. Corbett on all of those matters. Very much so. Very, very much so. Definitely, he was one of the first guys calling out a lot of stuff way before anyone was putting out videos like we're talking about a very long time ago. Mr. Corbett is definitely a champ. Like, for example, and then, okay, I'll fill in Mr. Tessarian. Mr. Michael Tessarian, I learned a lot about conspiratorial matters from him. He also has a highly encyclopedic knowledge of a lot of things. There are plenty of things I do not agree with him on. I don't agree with his view on God. I do not agree with his view on Christianity. I do not agree with his views on the tarot, on a lot of subjects. His view on Carl Jung, his view on a number of things, most definitely. And so David Whitehead, to go back to why I started talking about that, David Whitehead, being a student of Michael Tessarian, he also carries a lot of that stuff with him. But I first heard of the Tavistock Institute way before it became super, super hyper popular. I first heard about the Tavistock Institute from a couple of names, one of them being Michael Tessarian, James Corbett later on, way before I heard it from someone like Jay Dyer. That's not a slight or attack on Dyer. Dyer's been talking about Tavistock Institute for bajillions of years. That's not what I mean. Just at that time, I don't think I was fully... I mean, when I first was introduced to the subject of Tavistock, I don't think Dyer was doing anything online. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. I first heard the term and name in the 90s from a combination of a few individuals. But yeah, anyways, that matters. So why I'm bringing up all of this stuff? Why am I rambling about this? Well, I went back and I was watching some parts of some of the stuff that I was talking about with David Whitehead in 2021 when I had him on my show, and we touched on a lot of subjects in that conversation, things that later on became a little bit more popular. So going back to these three individuals, James Corbett, Michael Tessarian, and Jay Dyer. I had heard really good breakdowns. I don't even know where to go with this, or even how to express what's on my mind, or even why I'm even doing this. So please forgive me. Basically, City of London, Vatican, Washington D.C., all that, the tri-corporate cities. I'd heard about all these subjects from these kinds of dudes way back. It was a popular subject back in the day, and before the crisis, the economic crisis, 2000. I like to just gather them within years, like 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 10. Around that time, there was a lot of important things that occurred, and some of these things were, some of these subjects that are now coming back up again, were in the forefront of the conversation at that time. So I'm starting to see a lot of these subjects kind of percolating again, and they're being discussed. Great, that's awesome. And they're being taught, which is also good, and all that stuff. Man, boy, I struggle with these blunt conversations, don't I? So frustrated. Basically, this week, I was confronted with a bunch of different subjects and conversation pieces and opinions and all that stuff on a lot of the subjects that, I was obsessed with from like the late 90s to still to this day, but in a different from a different perspective. A lot of these subjects took me out of Christianity and took me on this crazy journey through the occult, as you already know, based around a lot of the stuff that I've just already touched upon, which probably makes no sense to anyone but me and barely makes any sense to me. It's also a lot of the things that brought me back to Orthodoxy. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these subjects, like mental, physical, and spiritual. That's always how I broke things down. And as an Orthodox person, it's great now to kind of view those three planes of existence. Let's call them that, just for the conversation's sake. Looking at them through an Orthodox lens, they all make a lot more sense to me now. Okay. And basically what I'm getting at is if we take things into account of like the stuff that I was talking about with David Whitehead in that first interview, a lot of the things that are discussed by Jay Dyer, James Corbett, I'm going to leave Michael Tessarian out of this for a second because really, honestly, most of what Michael Tessarian provided for me was a source of information and a direct pointing towards source material, which is always important, right? So that's the other thing is he would always be very, very diligent. Actually, all three of these individuals are extremely diligent, and they give you all their source materials with links and where to go to find them and this and that, okay? So definitely Mr. Tessarian helped me kind of start piecing things together, okay? And thankfully, I always kept that one axiom that I had from the get-go, from the very first video I put out in 2009. The right answer to the wrong question remains the wrong answer. Spend more time with the question. That's the axiom I came up with for myself all those many years ago to keep me on track. And thankfully, because I kept looking for the truth. What is the truth? What is the truth? Now I know it as the who. But at the time, it was what is the truth? Because that was my only point of importance. It was the only thing that was absolute to me. Everything else could change. If I found information that poked a hole in something, I would just back up and say, okay, I don't know anything about the subject. Let's kind of, So I didn't hold it as a dogma. Is my point. So thankfully, because I had that axiom keeping me on track, I started to find a lot of holes in the things I was into at the time over all those many years, and I kept looking for answers to patch up those holes, right? And I obviously came back to Orthodoxy because every time I kept patching those holes, I'd find out that, okay, that doesn't really patch that hole. There's still a problem here. There's still a problem here. There's still a problem here. How do I find a way out of this? How do I find a way closer to the truth? How do I get there, right? So the way Mr. Corbett and Dyer, Jay Dyer helped a lot, where they started filling in a lot of these holes. Now, Corbett, I felt more like kind of came up together on a lot of the way he views geopolitics in the world. But he did make a lot of references to a lot of the stuff that Jay Dyer also makes references to. For example, Tragedy and Hope. I'd first heard of Tragedy and Hope and Carol Quigley from James Corbett. Jay Dyer definitely took me. I got a university. Well, I didn't get the pass, but Jay Dyer provided me with like a university level breakdown of that book and many other geopolitical things that I definitely credit to Jay Dyer. But the point to this conversation is these three worlds, these three individuals and those three things, physical, mental, and spiritual, and my world at the time, which was consumed with the truth. For me, I was desperately looking for an explanation to consciousness. That's how I got into all that stuff. And in terms of like the geopolitical world and the conspiratorial world, or who runs the world and all that world elite stuff, You know, these things were all these subjects kind of came together for me, trying to break all this stuff down by trying to walk out of the new age, by really looking at how much of a social engineering strategy was applied to it, and how that relates to a lot of the stuff in the libertarian world, because it is constantly referenced in a document called Changing Image of Man, which I've constantly referenced, and it is the document that kind of made those three worlds kind of collide and get me out of the new age, show me the complete delusional experiment conducted, and that's kind of what it is. And then it made me kind of start looking at, okay, well, if I take all of these things I believed in and invert them, what do I get? And then that was orthodoxy. That's kind of how I came back to that. That document is a key thing for me on bringing all of these things together. The political stuff, the elite stuff, because there is a difference, the religion stuff, consciousness and all that stuff. So I had done that, and I think I've shown it a million times here, but it is kind of what I keep going back to bring me back to a point of balance, let's say. It is something that's quoted about the Tavistock Institute, and it's a video I did on, I think it's a year and a half now, where I was ramping up at that time, and I was going to start talking a lot more on social engineering, culture creation, and all the stuff that I'd studied for all those years, but avoided actually doing it. And then I started to go deeper and deeper into the Orthodox world that you guys know me of now, because that's far more interesting to me. So first of all, I'm going to take a break. Does anything I'm making make sense? I apologize for like the extra ramble of the rambles today. Does anything need to be a little bit more flushed out? Because I don't know how much detail I want to be dropping here, but I'm happy to break down some stuff and get more detailed and explain things further if someone's interested in what I'm jabbering about. Moldy says, your biography will be titled Changing Image of Mano. That would be a really good one, actually. Because like when I went back and I was looking at the thing of the video that I did with David Whitehead, I talk totally different. You know, okay, so I mean, one of the things I like some of these weird jabber streams come off like I'm not sure of myself. It's because like if you went back and you watch that interview, you'll realize how much more of like, I don't know how to say this without sounding egoistic, and I don't mean it to be, and I'm really not trying to make it sound like, I don't know how else to word this, so please forgive me, and I might be completely egoistic in saying so. So like that's totally possible, and I'm aware that that might be the case. But I know I've spent a lot of time, effort, energy, memory, whatever way you want to put it, in going deep into some of this stuff that I hear discussed out there, that I don't really talk about. You know, like that would be like a lot of the stuff in the world of conspiracy, mind control, social engineering, history of that stuff, the connection to Gnosticism, Hermeticism, how that stuff, you know, creeps into our society, and from there it becomes part of our culture. Like I'm really deep into that stuff. So in Buck's interview this week, when he had with I forget her name, and she was talking about her experiences in the New Age stuff, like I'm well versed in that world, and how it is connected to Luciferianism through the social engineers, through the governing elites that you cannot put a name to. If you can name them, they're not the ones that we're talking about that are really doing this stuff. And the way that they kind of put out this holographic version of a simulacrum, okay? These are the things I was like I know pretty well. Like, so when people are like, we're dropping some of these words that have been popular in the last couple of years, or even documents, like for example, the Gateway Experiment. I talk about the Gateway Experiment in the episode I did with David Whitehead. We talk about John Coleman, We talk about Tavistock Institute, the Committee of 300. We talk about City of London. We talk about a lot of that stuff. And even he, after we got off air, he's like, yo, this is your first episode? I'm like, yeah, this is my first episode. He's like, dude, like, you know, and I'm not trying to be egoistic, but he basically said, like, you know, you're crap. Why don't you say more of the stuff publicly? At that time, I was saying more publicly, but now I'm not. So I kind of almost sound like, because I haven't really been, you know, building my profile, let's say, online by discussing a lot of these issues, some people may not be aware that when I'm hearing other people talk about these things, like, to me, I'm like, oh, doesn't everybody know this? Like, I don't mean that in an egoistic, jerky sort of way. I mean that more like it caught me by surprise. I'm like, oh, I thought everybody knew this. And then I'm hearing some people's takes on things, and it's not like they're wrong or anything. It's just like they're making some errors that I made early in the game, and I'm like, oh, they're not connecting this to this. Am I making any sense, guys? Like, seriously, let me know if I'm making any sense, because I'm also trying to be careful. But the reason why I'm trying to be careful, I'll be clear on that, is because on some of these things, I don't want to invest too much. I get worked up and all this stuff on some of this stuff. Also, there's enough people arguing about different subjects, and I don't necessarily mean like in a bad way they're arguing. They're just disagreements on certain things and how they see things geopolitically currently, world affairs and country affairs as well. Yeah. I try not to say too much because I don't want to create more of a divide or whatever, but some people have been asking me privately some specific things that pertain to the financial situation, the North American Union. Yes, I'm a proponent of that as a theory, and not now. It was clearly stated that was their goal. John Coleman was very clear that was their goal, and not just him. Quite a few other authors have been clear on outlining that was their goal. That is their goal. Let me remind you, that's also discussed in 1984. They have the 5 continents as countries, right? You know, and that was the goal in the 90s. You know, so when I'm looking at can you see that? Yeah, that's the label on my jar. It's a coffee company. Before anyone gets upset, my boy Sammy Boots is in the house. What up, sir? Anyways, back to the story or what I'm doing here. I hope this ramble is okay here. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I mean, like, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but because I didn't spend time over the last couple of years putting out videos like that, people don't kind of know my background fully, other than like what I've just kind of jabbered on a couple streams where I've indicated. Like I watched, because someone was asking me about talking about Hermeticism, so I watched the interview I did with that when I was on Buck's show Counterflow, and we talked about Hermeticism, and a couple other conversations I had on some other interviews that I haven't really pushed or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I can go deep on some of these subjects. Now, I didn't put a lot of that content out on my channel on purpose, and I decided that, like, I didn't want to even look at those subjects anymore, or go through like the massive amounts of books and research that, like, I have next to me, some of it because I've been thinking about it again, and like some weird things. And these are only the stuff that I brought from Canada. So I think maybe I'll start with this and I'll see where it goes. Because also the other thing is, I don't want to take shots at anyone, or anyone feel that I'm taking shots on them, or that like I'm disagreeing with them publicly. And I'm not just talking about people that are my friends out there in the online Orthodox world. I'm not even worried about that, because I think they know me well enough to know like where I come from, the conversations I've had privately. It's just like, I don't know if I want to go out there like that. Like, I don't know if I want to put things out there like that, if that makes any sense. So I think in this video that I did, so one of the things was, I was watching parts of a talk I gave at a Anarchapulco sponsored event. For anyone out there that's libertarian, ex-libertarian, agro-capitalist, agorist, or any of that stuff, you know exactly what I'm talking about with Anarchapulco. So here in Mexico, Dollar Vigilante Jeff Berwick, he puts on this this conference, I guess it's called now, Anarchapulco, and he also sponsors some other events too. And I was asked to talk at this one Anarchapulco sponsored event. It was called the Mariposa Freedom Festival or something like that. So there was a lot of anarcho-capitalists there, a lot of libertarians, agorists there, and there was a number of people from Anarchapulco, like the organization, that were there as well. And I think I was the last speaker. And I was going to be talking about, it was a talk I used to give called, what is it called now? Cliche, wisdom hidden in plain sight. The power of cliche, wisdom hidden in plain sight. Something along those lines. I can't remember what exactly it was called. And how, like, basically the premise was, sometimes things that are made cliche have a lot of wisdom to them. They're right in front of you, but because you repeat them and it becomes a cliche, you it kind of loses its power until you stop and look at the answers often in front of you. And I would start off and talking about, like, how the joke, why did the chicken cross the road to get the other side? You know, that joke. What was it about that joke that was so funny? What was it about that joke? Why is that joke something that we still tell to this day? Like, kids will say this to this day. I heard it in Canada. Someone mentioned it. The chicken that crossed the road. Like, that was like the joke when I was a kid. I remember hearing that. And what was so funny about it? What was it? And then it dawned on me by something someone had said in a conversation. This is like 15 years ago, that the chicken may have committed suicide. Like, why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Well, that could be taken literally, or it could be taken like, why did he cross the road? To get hit by a car to make it to the other side. Right? So just the fact that something like that was in front of me my whole life, and I never really considered that was an option, that there was like power in hiding something right in front of you that you're going to overlook, and you're not going to pay attention or try to understand, right? Things like that. I gave a couple of those examples. And so I was going to talk about this and talk about some form of hermeticism. That's what I was going to talk about. And a few key other things that they were really excited for me to talk about. Autonomy, self-governance from the point of view of an agorist, and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, I was already kind of like leaving the world of the occult. Again, I'm using that as a blanket statement. I was leaving the world of the occult. I was leaving the world of libertarianism, agorism, really. I was leaving all of that stuff behind, and I was going very quickly and much like faster than I expected towards orthodoxy. So right at the point I was giving this talk, I was really, 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 like, I didn't know what to do. I was having kind of a form of an identity crisis, like the old man. Now I look back, it was like the beginning of the death of the old man. And I didn't know how to square this stuff. I didn't know what to do. So I'm supposed to be giving a talk in, like, literally it was like, I'm going to have to give a talk in an hour. At that point, I remember sitting there going, oh my God, I'm going to be up in an hour. And I got to talk about all this stuff that I don't even like want to talk about, or I don't even agree with, and this and that. So I basically sat down and I just quickly made some bullet points, and I changed the whole conversation. And I went into this conversation about New Age deception, the simulacrum, subjective opinions, subjective thinking versus objectivism, and how that's the main rule, the main way of controlling a populace and all that stuff. So I went into this conversation having that, and this is the talk that I gave that I've mentioned on a couple times, where by the end I was talking about monarchy. So I'm talking to a bunch of agorists and anarcho-capitalists, and it's the one I described even on Buck's show, and a couple others that had interviewed me, where by the end I was like, is anybody here a monarchist? Put your hand up. And I was the only one with my hand up. And I'm like, by the time I'm done, finished saying what I have to say, you more of you guys will be having like more of you guys will put your hand up and you'll agree that you're a monarchist as well. And as soon as you say that type of thing at a libertarian conference, agorist conference, and anarcho-capitalist conference, you're gonna get lynched. That is like, you don't say that, right? By the end, I did have them all. I had quite a few people putting up their hands. And it was based on, so what I'm getting at is, one of the things that shook me before coming there was rethinking a lot of the things I believed, applying a lot of the things that I was thinking about at the time, and rethinking things because of the axiom I mentioned earlier: the right answer to the wrong question remains a wrong answer. So maybe one day I'll actually even do that speech again. But before I do that, what's everyone saying in the chats? And I'll throw this video up. Anything interesting? And I might actually drop some opinions. I could feel them kind of percolating, coming to the forefront. Moldy Apple's overthinking, or is Mano overthinking? I overthink quite often, Denise. Moldy says, I think the joke just sums up that some conclusions are simple, and that's the humor in it. The joke is someone, their mind trying to get to the head of the chicken, trying to figure out why they would cross the road. That is what I thought too, Moldy. That is why I wasn't sure why it's funny, right? And that's how I went into it. But I don't know. I don't know if that is. Like, for example, one of the examples I gave during my talk, this is pre-Orthodox, so forgive that. Sometimes life has these riddles that are right in front of you that are purposely put there. I mean, they could be for good reasons or bad reasons, and you don't understand them until you're given the legend key. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what I mean by a legend key is like when you look at a map or whatever, a graph, and if there's a legend on the side, it'll indicate what color means what, or this and that, and it'll kind of give you a better thinking. Once you start kind of looking at certain things like that are cliche, they actually hold a lot more power than you even realize. For example, I don't know if you could see that. This is probably a very obvious one. A box with an X in it could just be a box and an X in it. And you could take it a bunch of different ways. But when you see that in hieroglyphic imagery or their iconography, that means a pyramid. So you could put that in front of someone and they wouldn't know what it means. And all of a sudden, it has a totally different meaning to different people. Like if you look at, there's a lot of those examples, and people give examples like that amongst conspiracy theorists and all that stuff, and all that stuff. But like, it is something that is important to keep in mind because that is how they communicate, the elite types or whatever. We know that, and you could bring up Masons and blah, blah, but that's not exactly what I'm referring to, but kind of. Okay, an example would be something that's in front of you. Okay. And this is not to directed to anyone, because a lot of people are talking about this subject, not one or two people. So please don't assume I'm referring to any one of our dear friends or anybody else when I say this. Please. It's not what it is. Because this is actually one of the cruxes of the things I had in a lot of my research as a pivot point. Now, my memory isn't as sharp on this subject because it's been a while since I looked into it, but I'm happy to break it down for anyone that wants a breakdown. How did we get to the point where we have three corporate cities, the City of London, the Vatican, and Washington, D.C.? How do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where, so this is an example to wisdom hidden in plain sight, that whole thing. This is like how I was looking at a legend key, for example, with the chicken crossing the road, or this being a pyramid, or 1 + 1 = 3. When does 1 + 1 + 1 equal, when does 1 + 1 ever equal 3? You know what I mean? This is a commonly used example in magic, in the occult, but it's also commonly used by regular people. They don't realize that's where it comes from. 1 + 1 = 3. Well, how do you get a 1 + 1 to equal 3? You have a husband and a wife. They have a child. There's a husband, a wife, and the child. 1 + 1 = 3. So you could say to someone, does 1 + 1 = 3? And they'll say no. But can you make 1 + 1 = 3? You can, if you give that example. Then in that example, you'll be like, oh yeah, I see what you did there, but 1 + 1 does not equal 3, it equals 2 or 11. But back to the corporate cities and how you can apply this similar logic that I'm describing with the 1 + 1 = 3, with the box and the X equals a pyramid, with the chicken crossing the road means he committed suicide. Well, then the way that you can connect that is like this. Well, how do you get to the point where you can have something like corporate city? What does that mean to be a corporation? Well, corp, dead body, right? Okay, well then you get this from all the libertarian / like, straw man arguments given about like natural, I'm the natural man versus this man, which I went down that road a lot. But there is some truth to thinking about that. Hold on, let's think about this. How do we get to the point where we can do such a thing as to have an entire city or country become a corporation? Because original law, when you had a corporation, I believe it's 1871. I should look it up before I say this because I wasn't prepared for this stream. I believe it was 1871. But I'm not 100% sure because I can't remember now. It's been a while since I thought of any of this stuff or looked into this subject. But that was the year where they separated the human from the business entity to make a corp. Like, you know how they say a corporation is a non-human entity? And then if you're suing somebody, you're not suing them, you're suing the corporation. Well, how do you get to that point where you take the human and separate them from what they're doing in a business? Like, how do we get there? Because before 1871, that wasn't the case. If you did something and you had a corporation and you were held liable, so how do they separate that liability from the individual? Well, then they made this law in 1871. I have to look into it, so please forgive me if if someone's like, oh, that's not true. Was this? They made a corporation a legal entity. You need that requirement to be able to separate a person from their legal accountability to something. You have to separate those two. You guys with me so far? So in 1871, they did this. Following around that time is when they started to create these corporate cities. Why would they do that? They needed first to have that separation, to have it become a legal entity, to separate themselves from that for a number of different reasons. Not only just to be able to avoid any accountability within law and all that stuff and your finances, but also to be able to separate yourself from the humans that and then you don't have to know who they are. Dr. Crispy, welcome. Good to see you. Says the Dutch East Indian Company was the first corporation. Correct. Yes. So that's talked about in great detail, 100%. And that is where we need to, you need to go, if you're going to study this part and look at it from this point of view, you have to go back to the Knights Templar, understand the Knights of Malta, the Hospitallers, all of them in the Holy Land fighting for and trying to maintain a Christian reign in Jerusalem. But what you end up having is the problem with the Crusades, which we all know that as Orthodox people, I don't want to get into all that, just a little, I don't want to go too far off that. But as Orthodox people, we know that the Crusades was not a good deal. But if you look at the history of the Crusaders, what they mean and what they're all about, you get an interesting point of view that's extremely different. Then you combine that with the Hospitallers, which become the Knights Templar, which is why the Vatican has its own military. You see where I'm going? You guys piecing any of this stuff together? Am I making any sense to anyone here? I don't even know if I'm making sense to myself. Then you start to attach the assassins. The assassins, now I'm going way off. Bring it all back to corporate law. All of a sudden, you have the development of these corporations, as Crispy mentioned, Dr. Crispy, my apologies, Dr. Crispy, not just Crispy. The Dutch East Indian Company was the first corporation, correct, followed by the British East Indian Company. And then you see where all that goes. Who was behind all of those two movements? What was their goal? What were they trying to achieve? How are they connected to the Knights Templar, the Hospitallers, the Vatican? You have that connection there. You require this to have that city within, that city, state, that country within another country, which is the Vatican. You need to have that to do that stuff. But you still can't apply that to a grand chessboard. You can't apply that to the grand chessboard at all until you separate and give a corporate entity its own personality. So therefore, you can go into the shadows where you can also make certain decisions and moves. Now, as Americans out there, you might know that the United States became a corporate entity around that time. That's an important thing to understand. It's also an important thing to understand where the history of that British East Indian Company, the Dutch East Indian Company, to understand that lineage, to understand at what point the banker became the governor of world affairs, and it wasn't about military, and it wasn't about that. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you guys are all well versed. I know you guys watch a lot of good content out there that has educated me on all this stuff. Awesome. How does that go back to the chicken crossing the road, the pyramid thing, 1 + 1 = 3? Well, right in front of us is this little riddle like that. How do you get to the point where you can have these cities? Why would they be like that? And why would they start creating this situation, this system? And how does that relate to Luciferian ways of governance? And it's all interconnected. I think I went off too far there. But the important thing is, what are they all trying to achieve? Whether it's them or the people that are trying to make us view identity in this identity politics sort of thing. How do we connect all this stuff together? How do we look at something like it's okay, Dr. Crispy. Dr. says I don't have a PhD. You don't have to. Apparently, chiropractors are considered doctors with actual DRs, and they don't have a PhD on anything or an MD or any D whatsoever. They just went to voodoo school. Sorry, threw that out there. Anyways, that's another thing. Like, that's the one. Go look at the history of chiropractics. Where does that come from? Who's the lunatic that came up with that theory? Dr. Crispy apparently is an MD. My apologies, Dr. Crispy. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Back to the point. I don't even know what the point is. But I do know the spiritual point that I try to keep my mind on as what are they trying to do? And how are they trying to pull this off? And why have you ever adjusted at a chiropractor? My really good friend, the guy that was even on the show in one of the convos with Mano, my best man, all that stuff, he is a chiropractor. Believe me, when I told him the history of chiropractic and like all the stuff and behind it, he was just like, yo, dude. Yeah, like you think that stuff doesn't have a lot of connection with Luciferianism? It absolutely does. Christian Science, Rosicrucians, a lot of the charismatics, chiropractic is connected to all of this stuff to a large degree. It's nuts if you look at the history of it. Actually, do I have it here? Oh, I don't have it here. I have it in my other stack of books. I have the breakdown of where that stuff comes from. Yeah, Buck's guest, I forgot her name, that was on Sunday, was mentioning some stuff, some connections with this stuff and the charismatics. And it came up sort of quickly, and I started thinking, oh, maybe I should do a stream on the occult history of a lot of those Christian offshoots. It all starts off with mesmerism. You could even tie Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, into this, and the prosperity gospel. Joseph Murphy, you can connect it all to this. It's easily connected. Chiropractic. Some people have been paralyzed. I would stay away from chiropractors. Go look at the history of chiropractics. Yes, Franz Mesmer. Give me a second. Is anybody still here? Give me a second. I'll actually go look for that book. It's a really good breakdown because it'll break down from it doesn't go into the ancient times, but it does kind of. No, it actually does. It talks about Neoplatonism. It talks about Pythagoras, the school of Pythagoras, and all that stuff. The BS retelling of ancient Egypt, all that, right up to Mesmer. Then you get mesmerism. Then from Mesmer, you go to, let's see if I can remember this. Not Carol Quigley's. I always mix up the two names. Mesmer, and then it went from mesmerism to. I should just go get the book. it makes its way to Christian Science and Mary Baker Eddy, Christian Science. But before that, there was the guy. Oh, I can't remember his name now. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. Wow, I forgot where I was going with all this stuff. You know what? I'll play this video and then I'll tie it into Father Seraphim Rose and the changing images of man, which is like how it kind of crept me out of all that stuff. You know what I mean? What up, Screwed Up Texas? Is going to be a totally weird ramble fest here, my dear brother. Hope you're doing well there, sir. So I'll play this video that I was. So I mean, if you guys have been keeping up with my jabbering up until now, this video I did.
So I've been putting this video off for a very long time.
I actually liked some of the edits on this. I looked a little bit healthier in this for sure. It's been a stressful year. This is around the time I was thinking about going back to a lot of this stuff, and I read from Daniel Eslin's book on Tavistock, which he makes reference to. I had to find the source where I end up reading there, and I think that goes back to LaRoche, where that was written. But it does illustrate the elite's sort of thing on this whole thing. Please let me know in the chats if I'm making sense. If you've just tuned in, I'm sorry. It's probably not going to make any sense because you got to go back and like catch up with the nonsense that was already there. You see how that makes sense? Go catch up with the nonsense to make it all make sense. Anyways, here we go.
Okay, so I've been putting this video off for a very long time.
I'm still putting it off.
The entire thing that I'm about to talk
still
about
putting it off
for a very long time. But recently I've gotten a lot of messages from people asking me, actually insisting that I talk more about the social engineering, culture creation. And they really want me to focus on the New Age deception stuff based off a lot of the videos I put out recently. The truth is I've been kind of putting it off because I kind of don't even want to do this. But people want to hear about it. So
forgot how good
I don't even know how to attack this massive beast because it's massive. So I decided that I'm going to put out little snippets here and there, and I didn't know where to begin. So I thought the best place to begin, reading from Daniel Eslin's book, The Tavistock Institute, because Daniel does a fantastic job of summing up what the goal is, what they have been doing. And in future episodes, we'll talk about the how and the whys. Basically, their mission statement, okay? So I'll read from this book. Ready? Every aspect of the mental and psychological life of people on the planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems. Above the closely cooperating groups of social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations presides the elite of powerful members of the oligarchy, comprised mostly of the old Venetian black nobility. What is the purpose of these behavior modifications, you may ask? It is to bring about forced change to our way of life without our agreement and without even ever realizing what is happening to us. The ultimate goal being the complete extirpation of mankind's inner sense of identity, the tearing out of mankind's innermost soul, the placement in the vacant space of an artificial synthetic pseudo-soul. However, in order to change mankind's behavior away from industrial production into spiritualism and to bring us willfully into the world of post-industrial era zero growth, zero progress, one must force first a change in mankind's self-image, its fundamental conceptions of what we are. Thus, the image of man appropriate to the new era must be sought, synthesized, then wired into mankind's brain. Now, if you really take that all in and kind of really think about what has happened over the last couple of years, not even just the last 3-4 years, but just in general, how things are forced upon us to create change, things that we've discussed before on this show. Now I'm going to start showing you guys a little bit of some evidence, and as well as some of the reasons why Daniel says what he just says right there. We're going to go through some documents. We'll go through some actual examples, and I also would like to start showing practical things, but just in mankind's brain. Post-industrial era, change mankind's behavior in the vacant space, inner sense ever realized.
Yeah. most of what I was reading there, like I think it nails what I'm trying to say, and I guess part of my reason for rambling about some of the stuff. He even mentions in there. Hold on, I have the book next to me actually. He hits on the mark if you understand what he's really describing there. Every aspect of like what I've been rambling about, generally speaking. Right down to he mentions the Venetian black nobility, which is the basis of actually the Knights Templar. Where did that money go? The Knights of Malta. Where did that money go? In terms of like the three corporate cities, that's who it is. What Dr. Crispy mentioned, the Dutch East Indian Company, and same with all of that stuff is connected with all of the stuff, the psychological psyops that is occurring, which is kind of why I'm bringing up some of the subjects and some of the things that are on my mind. Although I'm also trying to be very careful here again. And like I said earlier, if I had gone back and played some of the David Whitehead stuff, you'd hear me mentioning and David talking about a lot of the stuff that is now, front page news, oddly enough. And it is weird to even think that would be front page news if you were around back in the day. Also, as a little point, just a little caveat, a little pause, a little tangent of a tangent off a tangent. During the mid 2000s there, when they had the Occupy Wall Street stuff, that was a very interesting time. That was also an interesting time because that wasn't planned. Not the incident that caused it, but the actual event of like, the Ron Paul stuff, take back the feds and, abolish the feds and, take back your cities and all this stuff. You know what was weird about that thing is you had both, let's call them the left and the right, for lack of an argument, it was meant totally different things back then. But basically you took both sides of every subject and everything out there. You could be a libertarian, you could be a communist, you could be a this, you could be a that. And everyone kind of agreed that they were getting duped and screwed over by the bankers and that central banking is problematic and the feds was a problem. And everybody was kind of like, I hate you on this subject, says the capitalist to the communist, and the communist, but I hate you for these reasons. And the libertarian is, I hate both of you guys. And this, and then everyone would start arguing. But what they all agreed on was that stuff. And they all stopped and went, the one thing we can all agree on is these malakas are malakifying the world. And everybody started to have conversations about these subjects. And it was grassroots from that point of view. And it was something that if you were there or you were around at that time or old enough to look at that stuff or even interested enough to look at what was going on, this was a global situation that was occurring. And that's what they really didn't want people to do, was to have that conversation where they can realize and see, hey man, communist or not, hyper-capitalist or super religious this religion or super religious that religion, agnostic, atheist, whatever color you are, whatever you want to cut off of your body or you don't want to cut off your body, everybody was on board with this whole thing. Okay? And that's when they started to figure some stuff out and be like, okay, this could be more dangerous. And it's when they started to apply some of the techniques and some of the things used in putting people into different groups and grouping people into little echo chambers and then having those echo chambers kind of all confront each other like at once. Okay, like it's quite simple tactic of divide and conquer, and it's something that was easily learned and observed during World War I, World War II, when a lot of the social engineers that was described and already, John Rawling Rees, for example, he spent a lot of his time after World War II talking to certain people that were part of the stuff going on in World War II, Germany stuff, whatever, and some of the mind control stuff. Again, I'm not like propagating any of like the us versus them thing. This was like a time for them. War is an amazing time for you to figure out what makes people work, what makes people not work, what makes people break, what makes people come together, what makes all that stuff. which is why I'm really looking forward to doing breakdowns on anti-human and looking into what happened in Romania. I really hope I haven't lost anyone here with this all over the place, me trying to connect things. The point is that this has been an ongoing experiment of right down to Gustav Le Bon writing The Psychology of Crowds, The Crowd, right? That's a great example. Gustav Le Bon wrote that book in the late 1800s. Fans of that book are people that you know. Like if you list off the names of the people that you know, from Freud to Stalin to Mussolini, you pick it. They all read this book, but like right down to even like people that we consider good people. Okay, Edward Bernays. Everyone knows all this stuff now, and it's great. But let's keep it all in mind as we try to put this together and start to connect these dots. What I'm getting at is, and I'm going to get back to the point, is everyone's kind of looking at all this stuff as separate, and then they'll every once in a while see, oh, it's connected, but then they quickly forget that it's connected, and they'll go and they'll put everything into a compartment again, and they'll separate the logical thinking behind, the Knights Templar, Knights of the Templar, the Crusaders. Sorry, the Templars, the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, Vatican, the Rothschilds, City of London, French Revolution, Washington, like all of this stuff. Move it forward to Gustav Le Bon talking about the psychology of crowds and how to make a dictator. Really, that's like a great manual on how to make a dictator and how to use psychology of crowds against themselves. It's already in the book, the title, how those are taken and applied. And then you see you think that the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was the first time they tried to make a central bank in the U.S.? Absolutely not. There was 3 other attempts at doing so. Okay, in the 1800s. All of this stuff is connected. Even if you bring in the Theosophical Society, it's connected. And then you start bringing in communism, connected. You start bringing in capitalism, connected. You want to start bringing the Tavistock Institute and all this stuff. It's all connected, and they're all different things. And I know a lot of people out here already agree with me, and they know what I'm talking about. I'm not teaching you anything. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying, don't forget that these things are all connected. They're all connected. They're all one thing on top of the other, especially if you apply God and you start looking at it from a biblical perspective as to what is Satan, the devil, whatever way you want to call him, Lucifer, whatever way you want to do it. I don't want to break down theology here, or how do you view that story? The story of how what the intention is by the fallen angel. What made the fallen angel fall? How did that he try to entice and convert Adam and Eve? All of these things. And you could start seeing that this runs itself throughout history if you look at it from the perspective that cliche, the answer is often right in front of you, just like the chicken crossing the road, just like this is a pyramid, just like 1 + 1 = 3. The wisdom is hidden in plain sight. If you keep these things in mind and you start to look at what's happening today, right now, a lot of the things around us start to make a lot more sense. It really does. So what I was reading there in that video, saying, what is the purpose of their behavior modification? You may ask, what is the purpose? Why do this? Why do this from the beginning? Like literally, if you look at the story, Adam and Eve, which I don't want to break down to it because I don't want to break down theology stuff. I'm not the guy for that stuff. But just at basic, looking at that story, the Gnostic looks at the hero as the snake. We already all know this from listening to stuff on Gnosticism and all this stuff. And it's truly viewed that snake to them is like a god to the Gnostics and all the people that are doing all this stuff, because he's giving wisdom to the people, and kind of like from the perspective, how dare he, God, keep wisdom from you? Sorry, knowledge. Sorry, tree of knowledge. My apologies. Knowledge. Take wisdom out. Bring in knowledge. That's what the point I was trying to make. And you start putting a lot of this stuff into perspective. The things that I kind of jumped all over the place about, because this is in a stream where I'm going to break all this stuff down with evidence and all that. Just me rambling, guys. What is the purpose of their behavior modification, you may ask? It is to bring about forced change to our way of life without our agreement and without ever realizing what is happening to us. Okay. They want to change our way of life. Well, what do they need to do? They need to remove God and then change the definition of things within a family, change the definition of a family. You know what I mean? Get rid of the male and this and that, and then start changing the stuff that you see in communism, the stuff that you see in a lot of the isms, generally speaking. That's the way of life that they want to change, is a way of life of looking at us as image, made in the image and likeness of God, and trying to reflect that. That's who we are. We're trying to. They want to remove that. They want to remove the concept and idea of patriarchy within a family, within a nation. Why do they want to remove patriarchy within a family? Well, because it's easier to subvert the family. It's easier, and then people will be like, well, they want to double the income tax, so they want women back in the workforce. Yeah, these are all like bonuses that they got. But what they really got is, if you could dismantle the family and the patriarchy within a family, it's very easy to do that within a nation. And if you do that within a nation, you have the problems we see around us, everywhere we look. Because we don't have those hierarchical systems in place to keep things in check, the checks and balances. We don't have those in place. You remove God, you remove the patriarchal system, then it's easy to do whatever you're doing here, right? And then let me just remind you, the statue of Baphomet. Everybody knows this. That stuff, and anything with the word that in the first couple letters in place of any word is their goal. They want to, what do they want to do? Well, again, what do they want to do? To bring about forced change, to transmute something. Very much alchemy. It's alchemy through and through. Right? Again, I'm not telling you something you already know. You already know this. The last principle within the 7 alchemical principles, the very last one, my dear brothers and sisters, the very, very last one that's in there is gender. You see that? That's the last one. And there's a reason why that transmutation is required. There's a reason why it goes back to the Luciferian stuff. There's a reason for that. There's a reason. And it's to want to bring about the forced change to our way of life. That is the trans of anything. Again, like I mentioned on that interview with Buck, and I was talking about Hermes, Trismegistus, Hermes, thrice great, part of the Hermetic lineage of teachings and all that stuff. Let me remind you, it's even talked about by Manly P. Hall. It's talked about by Manly P. Hall in his gigantic book, which I have downstairs, that Hermes was a messenger god in Greek mythology, which is why you have those wings on the Goodyear emblem, the Goodyear, the tire company. They have wings on the back. That's the Romans refer to him as Mercury, and he has the wings on the back because he flew so fast to deliver the messages. In Greek, a messenger is angelo. Angelo is angel. You already know all this stuff too. I'm not teaching you something you already know. The word angel in Greek means messenger. Okay? And the messenger, God, was a fallen angel. If you look at it from an Orthodox perspective. Now it's one of two things here. Either Hermes, Trismegistus, was a fallen angel, like the fallen angels that followed that other dude, or was influenced by a fallen angel, which is described in, I don't have it here, The Way of Hermes is described in there, that Pomander, a fiery serpent, comes and gives him the message. It starts off that way. What book is that? If you're referring to this book, are you talking to me or are you talking to someone else? punchy. If you're talking to me, this one's the Tavistock Institute by Daniel Esselin, and the other one that I had up was the Kabbalion, the Hermetic Principles. if you were talking to me, I'm not sure. The Last Crusader by Warren H. Carroll. Oh, yeah. Screwed up. Texas says Karl Marx developed his Communist Manifesto in England. Yeah. That's a big subject. What the communists did in 1930 Spain is horrific. No doubt there. Anyways, I don't know where I was. I'll just try to find my way back to this. So then using this as an outline to break things down and then apply it to Orthodox ways of thinking, a la Father Seraphim Rose, think of Orthodoxy Religion in the Future, think of nihilism, think of the Survival Handbook, all that stuff. It's very much like St. Paisios. I mean, there's so many examples. The ultimate goal, hold on, it is to bring about forced change to our way of life, which we kind of just described, sort of, without our agreement. So here is the whole concept of consent. Now, the thing is, you can't force someone to give you their consent, and it won't be legally binding. Again, back to the corporate stuff that we're talking about, which you'll hear from a lot of people talking about natural law versus corporate law and admiralty law and all that stuff that was so popular back in the day and then became popular again during the last couple of years. There's some bullshit there. There's some truth there as well. But what is definitely true is a form of an agreement has to be made. There has to be consent. Whether you're aware of what you're consenting to or not, consent is required as a spiritual contract. It is why, in my opinion and many others, and many others, why the last couple of years spiritual war that we are full on in, the spiritual war that's occurring around us, whether it be the things that they wanted you to shoot up in your, all that stuff, or the way you treated your child, or whether you bowed down to putting the malachias on your face or whatever. Again, that's not a judgment call on anyone that did that stuff. I'm just saying that even if you didn't agree with a lot of those things, as we went about some of those decisions, we were giving our consent, and that's what's required on a spiritual level. My opinion, and like many others would agree with that you're giving consent, you're consenting, even though you do not want to participate in certain things, which is why those guys that talk about natural law versus admiralty, mercantile law, and corporate law and all that stuff, talk about signatures, what they mean and all that stuff. It is a form of consent, but it's required because you would not give your consent to changing what humanity is, the image and likeness of. We were created by God in his image and likeness, that they would require, they being the not so good guys, would require your consent in agreeing to change that, to make it, you know what I mean? That's why they require that, because on a spiritual level, that is a requirement. Okay, so back to this, without your agreement. So it is to bring about forced change in our lives without our agreement and without ever realizing what is happening to us. Let's keep that in mind when we're thinking about what's going on in 2025. Let's keep that in mind if we're saying the next little part. And I'm going to try to sum this up real quick. The ultimate goal being the complete extrication of mankind's inner sense of identity. It's to get rid of the inner sense of identity, because if you identify as who you are, and who you are is a human being created in the like and image of God, if that is your identity, if that's how you identify as, well then the way you go about certain things out there is going to be vastly different than someone that has a subjective opinion of their identity. They subjectively changed their identity with whatever way they want to change it. We all know all this stuff. I don't need to tell you what the good examples out there. You probably have 35 billion examples of how they play with identity politics and what identity is and how to get you to identify. You know. But this is what they're trying to do, right? They just want to rid you of your inner sense of identity, the true identity of who you are. Okay? tearing out mankind's innermost soul, and the placement in the vacant space of an artificial, synthetic pseudo-soul. We clearly see that around us. Whether you want to talk about woke politics, communism, whether you want to talk about like people that are hardcore on the right, whatever way you want to look at with that statement, it still stands true. They want to create a vacant space in there and then fill it with something. And then there's multiple things we can bring up. We can bring up, the infantization of humans, and how that by making us feel like infants and that we need someone to take care of us. Then we go to the mommy daddy state and all that stuff. We can play all those games. We could do all that stuff, and we can keep that all in mind. But how are you still getting duped? Are you still getting duped? Is there wisdom in plain sight where you can kind of figure out how to play this game differently and look at the things around you and say, maybe these things aren't exactly as I see them. Maybe they're not exactly as I'm being told. How do you know what to believe when you're bombarded with this Malakia device right here, and then it's giving you all these different opinions from people we love, people we don't love, people we tune on someone we don't like, and then all of a sudden they're making sense. We tune on someone we do like, and they're not making sense. Like, where's your discernment come from? If for us Orthodox Christians, it comes from Christ. If for us Orthodox Christians, it comes from like the church and our traditions and our history and our practices and all of those things, well, then that keeps in mind that our inner sense of identity is there. But if they start manipulating with that, they will create that empty space, and they will fill it with an artificial synthetic pseudo-soul. However, in order to change mankind's behavior away from industrial production, coming out of the Industrial Revolution, coming out of the world of industry, look at yourselves as Americans. Look at where the United States of America was post-World War II. Look at where they were up until the 70s. You were being warned time and time again. John Coleman in his Committee of 300 was very clear and talked a lot about a subject that is extremely popular today in the news: tariffs. And the Tavistock Institute applying a sloganeering marketing approach to isolationists and making the term isolationist a bad thing. An isolationist, do you guys know what I'm talking about here? I feel this is going to get spicy. I know where I want to go, and I'm afraid to go there, but I might. So I'm going to write that down. Tariffs in the Tavistock Institute. Tariffs. Tariffs. You hear that a lot? Tariffs. You hear that a lot. Central banking, you hearing that a lot? Are these not mentioned over and over again by these people that we're talking about? It says here, the Venetian black nobility. We're talking about central banking. The Venetian black nobility, we're talking about central banking. John Coleman, we're talking about tariffs. Who was a part of all these things that they were trying to do here? Every aspect of your mental and psychological life and the people around you on the planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems. Above the closely cooperating groups of social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations, you know them all. Hold on, I'm going to see how far I get into this and if I'm going to start connecting some things that I feel are important to connect, or if I won't, I don't know. I don't know how far I want to go with this because I don't want to start creating a problem out there because that's not what I actually want SOS to be. I'm surprised because that's not where I came from. I came from a very highly conspiratorial, research-based, spirituality stuff-based stuff, and I always thought I'd be out there doing what I see a lot of other podcasters doing, which I've been asked to do and I don't want to do. Actually, I'm surprised at myself. I don't want to go out there fighting with people. And there's a good reason for that. There's a lot of good people out there, and I don't want to get in the middle of it, and that's not why. It's also, I don't know if it's my place. Anyways, However, in order to change mankind's behavior away from the industrial production into spiritualism, so here when they're making reference to spiritualism, they're making reference to the spiritualism that came out of the New Thought movement, that came out of, Thoughts Become Things movement in the late 1800s, that came out of the Transcendental movement, which came out of the 1800s. Guys like Emerson, okay, Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, people like that, right? Like that stuff, right? So that's the spiritualism they're referring to, and they're referring to a subjective version of understanding God, which is a very perennial, very Gnostic, very malleable form of faith, if you want to call it that. Yes, Barbara Marx Hubbard, someone just threw that in there, crispy, 100%. Yes, cats like that, right? Like that's what we're talking about. Margaret Mead, guys that like Joseph Campbell, like we're talking about these cats. This is the spiritualism they want. This is the spiritualism behind the Theosophical Society, and it's what they want. They want to move you away from industrial production into spiritualism. Why? Because that will make it your God, your malleable God, where they can then take that malleable God and manipulate it into any which way they want, and then push it down your throat, and then you become that identity politics beast out there. That does not mean that if you're on the far right, far conservative and religious, and that doesn't mean that you're not, you're not also a target. You're probably more a target. I'm not talking about Orthodox people in our perspective. I'm just talking about, kind of far, you know what I'm talking about. I think I'm just trying to avoid any words. Okay. And then they want to bring us to willfully into a world of post-industrial era, zero growth, zero progress. Well, if you look at the American country, like post-World War II, manufacturing was strong. You had the ability at that point to actually start implementing proper tariffs. At that point, there was some certain types of it there. You were growing as a nation. The money was staying within the country. It was still part of that. It was plenty of growth. There was all that stuff. They need to move you out of all that. So they're going to do it economically. They're going to do it financially. They're going to do it politically. And they're going to do it spiritually. Okay? And they've already done all that stuff. Okay? And the final thing to drop here is the spiritual part. This is what I'm moving towards there. It says, so they want to move into a world of post-industrial zero growth, zero progress. By the way, zero growth makes a point to the Club of Rome, and the Club of Rome wanting that zero growth, zero production. This is where you get your Malthusian style thinking within, where I'm going with this. I'm getting worked up already. This is why I can't talk about this stuff. One of the forces for one must first force a change in mankind's self-image, its fundamental conception of what we are. Thus, the image of man, appropriate to the new era, must be sought, synthesized, and then wired into mankind's brain, which is outlined in detail on how to go about doing that with the document by the Stanford Research Institute, The Changing Image of Man. Changing Image of Man, which is what I was getting at. Now, let's kind of go back and touch upon some of the stuff that I mentioned here and to see how I'm connecting it to what's going on today. Look, these people, let me be clear with these people. They cannot necessarily be named. And if you're naming any bodies of governments or people or institutions or this and that, that's not the people. That just isn't the people. If you look at the history of the black nobility, you'll clearly see that it's not the people. Okay? It's very clear. We're presented with this bizarre narrative in 2025. Give me a second here. Let me just see if I can get this all out. So I tried to touch upon a few things here today. I really don't know if any of it made sense. I jumped all over the place from David Whitehead to Michael Tessarian to John to Jay Dyer, James Corbett, John Coleman, all this stuff. I was running around all over the place. Talked about corporations, the natural man, all that stuff that we talked about, and Templars, all that stuff that we tried to that all is all related with banking, psychology. It's all connected to spirituality, meaning God versus the devil. Okay, and then Keep in mind, their religions is that malleable, subjective way of thinking things. That's how they want to promote their religion, that they want to promote to the people. That's not their religion. Their religion, personally, they know, they're very clear. They know subjectivism is dangerous. They're not subjective people. They're very much about objectivism, 100%. Now, they've been studying us for all this long time. And for those of you that know the Tavistock Institute's history, awesome. Maybe one day I will get around to talking about this stuff. I don't know. I've been putting this off for at least 8-9 years, really. Definitely since the last couple of years, I was going to put it. I was going to start talking about it. No one was really talking about it. Then some people started talking about it. Then it became... Anyways, if you look at the history of the Tavistock Institute, and you go further than just the quick introduction to the Institute and where it comes from, before it was called the Tavistock Institute, who was behind it? We all know Sigmund Freud. We all know his great-grandson, Edward Bernays. We all know the owner and runner, Rudolf Bernays, whatever his name is, who's got Netflix. I mean, these are all very interesting connections that people should really consider. Again, going back to the, cliche, wisdom hidden in plain sight and obvious things right in front of you. That's kind of obvious. That's an obvious one. From the grandfather to the great-grandson to the great-great-great-great-grandson, all involved in one form or another of propaganda and dissemination of propaganda, including the person that wrote the book Propaganda, Bernays. And I'm sure you guys already all know all this stuff, and I've repeated this. Many others better than me have repeated this as well. He also took the word propaganda and he took a marketing spin on it that he got through the Tavistock Institute, which he's also connected to, and renamed it public relations. You know, we all know this stuff. Why am I pointing all this stuff? Why did I read all this stuff? Why did I say every aspect of the mental and physical life of people on this planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems above the closely cooperating groups of social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations? You think that they've been studying us this long? You think that they went as far as to understand shell shock in World War I and then rename it a million times to get post whatever PTSD and all this stuff? You get to all that. You think that they studied to figure out how they take an average man who's just a family farming guy who's got a family and this and that, and because he was given a musket or a rifle and he wasn't going to shoot somebody because he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. Do you know how hard it is to shoot a person? Not everyone can do that. And they had to go, okay, how do we brainwash this individual to be able to hand a gun to the average person, like an average run-of-the-mill lay person, and hand this farmer a gun and have him point that gun at somebody else and pull the trigger? That was one of their first things that they wanted to study. They wanted to study on how to get the U.S. into the war. You guys know all this stuff. I'm preaching to people that are well-educated and know what's going down in G-Bar Town. But what I'm trying to say is they've been studying our psychology that long. Remember, I said Gustave Le Bon, The Crowd. I believe that was late 1800. Manny, can you look up when the book The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon was released? I think it was 1880 something. Gustave Le Bon, The Crowd. Should be a quick, easy Google search. But you have that from that point. Never mind stuff that predates that, where they're clearly looking at like how they can control the populace mentally speaking. The reason why they can't just walk into a place and just gun everybody down and say, okay, now we're in charge, whoever's left living, and say we're going to take over. The reason why they can't do that, and someone that's thinking, well, why wouldn't they just do that with the world? Why would they try to like manipulate people? 1895, Manny says the book The Crowd was written. I was off by 10 years or so, 12 years. Or whatever the math is. Who cares? The math doesn't math. I hate that saying. So stupid. Anyways, I don't remember where I was at. Point. So they've been studying us for this long. They've been looking at people going into war, coming out of war, how to brainwash a populace. You could think of 35 bajillion examples here of false flags and all the stuff that we could bring up, examples where clearly this was done. You think they've been studying us that long? You think the ruling elite, the Venetian black nobility, and other people there that are that high up and have taken so many resources from the early days? You think now all of a sudden they forgot all this stuff. They don't know how to apply this stuff, because sometimes the narrative you're given is like a lot of these guys that are elites, deep states, or whatever term you want to use are numbnuts. They're just a bunch of dummies. Sure, there's plenty of them. Sure, the son of George Soros knows way less than his dad. Sure, that guy grew up as a trust fund baby and, you know, blah, blah. Sure, we could make all these claims, but do you really think that the people that really control things, that give you the illusion of an election, all this stuff, you really think they forgot how to manipulate you? You really believe that they forgot how to manipulate you? You really think that their mind control stuff and all that stuff that you've learned about for the last couple of years or however long you've been into this, you think they all of a sudden forgot about all that and that stuff's just going to go away? You believe that? Does that make sense to anybody? Because it doesn't to me. It doesn't at all. In fact, they're doing everything they said here, man. Like, it's just clear as day. They said they have a cooperating group of social engineers, psychologists, like, it's clear as day, think tanks and foundations. So what I'm getting at is be careful what narrative you're buying and how you're buying it and what you're believing in. I'm not saying you should be blackpilled. I am not blackpilled by any which way, any means. But let's just go back to this narrative that they've built, this way of social engineering, the way that they make reality part of a simulacrum, part of an adult amusement park. Everything we do and the illusion that we have before us, and whatever way you want to take those words. I don't have the answers, but I could just tell you right now that if they've done so much work and they know how to control us to this degree, you know what I mean? And if we know things as basic and rudimentary as like Timothy Leary, LSD experiments funded by the CIA to get everybody, the counterculture revolution kicked off, the acid test trips with Ken Kesey, Jim Morrison and his dad and the Gulf of Tonkin and Vietnam War, Project Phoenix, Mockingbird, all this stuff. You think all of a sudden, like, I think all of the people, even if they disagree with me, unless they're just straight up, blind and asleep, they'll all be like, oh yeah, of course they didn't stop MK Ultra in the 70s. Everyone knows that. But now let's extrapolate that. Let's move that forward. Let's look at the last 20 years. Everything before the big incident that happened in September 2001 and all that stuff. Before all that, all the things that we've kind of touched upon basically, and now all of a sudden, let's play a game. Let's say you are this group of people that have all this information that has been, as it said here, yet again. I'll go back to that because it's just it's worded so perfectly. Now I totally lost where I was. I was somewhere. I'm no longer there. Here, where it says every aspect of your mental, psychological life and psychological life of people on the planet was profiled by all the stuff I've just described. Institutions I haven't even mentioned as well that apply to this, from the Rand Corporation onward. IBM, good example, IBM. Every aspect of the mental, psychological life of people on the planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems. And they started to apply all these experiments to see how you would react and how you would go about things, coming up with things like nudge theory. You know what I mean? Which is something as simple as, I've given this example 100 times. What was his name? Cass Silverstein, whatever his name was. He was part of the Obama administration. He wrote the book Nudged. I can't remember his name. And he's one of the social engineers that talks about how to take a lot of those stuff and apply it to social media and all that stuff. And nudge theory is best described by saying, walking up to a table as a waiter and saying, what wine are we having today, white or red, guys? And everyone's going to pick a wine in their mind. Even if they don't drink wine, they'll say, I don't drink wine. But they'll pick red or white. I picked red because I prefer red. That is a form of nudging, okay? Now, let's say they've studied us to this nth degree. We agree on that. I think for the most part, if you're listening to this and you're at this point, you agree with me at least to a certain degree. Now, if you wanted to get people, my dear friends, to do some of the things that were also described here. So now we could say, okay, they have been studying us. We could see clear evidence for that for the last 100 years, if not further. Gustav Le Bon, let's start from there and move on forward. 1895, right? From their point on to now. And then we know that the black nobility has control of the finances, this and that. We know that. We know the majority of the institutions and government bodies that we mentioned, NGOs that we mentioned, they're not exactly the ones in the ruling position, because why? You have to be in the shadows, wisdom hidden in plain sight. Don't make it obvious who you are. My example for that is, why are there connections being made between the three corporate cities, and why is that as important as it is? It's as important as it is. Those three corporate cities, again, just to recap, Vatican, City of London, Washington, D.C. There are others, but those are the three majors. Actually, that's why you have these three stars here. That's what this flag represents. Those are the three stars and why it's represented as such. So if you can't see why that's important, and the reason why it is important is because of that again, sorry, I think it's 1871 when they changed, where they gave corporate entities the ability to separate themselves from a human body. That's extremely important. Without that, there's none of this stuff matters. Really, you have to have that in place. If those are all true, if we agree that that every aspect of our mental, psychological life of people on this planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems, you can find documentation of that. You guys are all well versed. You already know all this. So if that's true, and the people behind all these people trying to do all this stuff, and we've named some of the names, are social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations, if that's also true, that preside with the elite and powerful members of the oligarchy, comprised mostly of the old Venetian black nobility, which are the banking families of Venice, the merchants of Venice, which we already talked about the Dutch, we already talked about the English as first corporations and what those bodies did, and how the Venetian black nobility are a part of both of those. If those are all true, and then we look at the rest of this thing, I keep reading it, but I think this is a good way of like summing it all up and why I'm bringing it up. What is the purpose of these behavioral modifications? You can ask, well, it's to bring about forced change. We talked about why forced change is important. Without our agreements, we talked about consent and why that's important. And without ever realizing what is happening, now the importance of that is, it has to be done without realizing what's happening, or else you wouldn't do it unless you're addicted, right? Because you won't walk into a trap where you know that the end result is a bullet to the head unless you don't know that's going to happen, or you're a complete brainwashed idiot. Those are the goals that they want to get to. Back to reading this. Without ever realizing what's happening, the ultimate goal being the complete extirpation of humans' inner sense of identity. We talked about that. The tearing out of the human innermost soul. We talked about that. And in its place, the vacant space. We talked about that. Of an artificial synthetic pseudo soul. We already talked about that. So now if all this is true, and what they're trying to do is move people away from post-industrial era, zero growth and zero progress, to one more focused on changing the image of mankind, which has happened for the last little while, and they've been studying us, as we've said, okay, and we know all of these things to be true, and the ultimate goal is, thus the image of man appropriate to the new era must be sought, synthesized, and wired into mankind's brains. If these are all true, and they understand how to maneuver and manipulate and create their versions of simulacrum style thinking, delusional thinking, all that stuff, well, wouldn't it be interesting if they just used movie plots, which is what they've been practicing on doing, and taking anti-heroes and making them heroes? And getting, if you wanted to, back to when we were talking about Occupy Wall Street and all that stuff. I picked that one because it's a little bit easier, middle of the road. It's kind of related to some of the things that are happening politically right now. and you were afraid of people getting together like that, like which they were technically 100%. And we saw a recap of that, a replay of that with the truckers, which I think it's the anniversary of the truckers. So let's look at those two things as against their plan. Let's just look at those before we get into the programming things, because I don't want to really upset people too much without some sort of background. Now, if you look at the what happened with the grassroots version of Occupy Wall Street, culminating to like leftists and rightists, communists and capitalists and atheists and agnostics and religious people and gay people and straight people and this person and man and woman and this and culture and that culture all around the world, all at the same time going, yeah, those malakis are malakifying everyone. The black Venetian banking families are really doing a number on this. They were all in unison worldwide calling against centralized banking. In the US, you'd have chants and screaming of like down with the feds and all that stuff. And worldwide, you had all this stuff, right? And that happened grassroots. Everyone kind of came together because the calamities were so huge. I haven't even brought up Cyprus. Maybe I'll write that down. Cyprus. And why I think Cyprus is a good example of what's coming. Maybe I'll talk about that. Maybe I won't. Who knows? But I think that's an important one. It has nothing to do with me being Cypriot. It just has to do with what happened to Greece and Cyprus at that time. I believe there's a particular reason why they chose Greece and Cyprus as the place to do their experiment. But the retaliation to what happened economically was the Occupy Wall Street. They were terrified by what they saw, that they being the real rulers, and they understood that can never happen again. Well, another time where you saw something like that happen, and again, it's not because I'm Canadian, and believe me, I don't agree with 99% of Canadians on most things, except for that Much Music was way better than MTV. And Norm Macdonald's anyways, outside of all that kind of stuff, the truckers thing was another example of a grassroots fuck you. I'm just going to say it that way. My apologies for using those words, but that was what that was. It was an absolute, we ain't going to do this no more. And it came from the last place on the planet you would have thought something like that would happen is Canada, because of the way Canadians are. Okay? Like, I was amazed and surprised by that. I was in Mexico when that occurred. I was like, no way Canadians are going to do this. In the whole country, the most pacifists, the most brainwashed, the most just a bunch of like soft individuals up there. Let's put it that way. That place, that country said, we're not doing it. And that country had a grassroots movement, just like the Occupy Wall Street thing, where all of a sudden the entire country was like, no. Again, forgive me for my crassness. That was the beginning of a domino effect worldwide. We all know that. For the Australian, everybody, like Germany, Poland, like everybody just lost it right down to then you had the farmer truckers, this and that. And that went on for a while after, the trucker thing in Canada stopped. That was another example of grassroots situation that terrified the actual elite, not the one that we kind of like touch upon and talk about, here, the actual ones. That really terrified people. And I can't think of any other which way to saying, like, me personally as an Orthodox Christian, I'll say God had his hand in that, in both of those things, to kind of give people, this is just the way I'm saying it. I'm not speaking for the church. I'm not speaking, I just my opinion. I'm just some dude. Just keep that in mind. But it was a way of God going, hey guys, you have more say than you think you do in both of those two examples. Okay. Now the quote unquote elites, the ones I've made reference to 100 billion times in this conversation, they definitely took note of those two events. 100%. Really? If you don't really stop and think about it, without the trucker thing in Canada, those passports and all those other things would not have dropped away so quickly. They just wouldn't. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that. That was something I was going to bring up earlier when I brought up like my past and like where I was coming from, my knowledge base, whatever, or lack thereof, and my first interview with Thing and how much, the stuff I was into. Believe me, I was into the stuff before the COVIDs came up. And I'm telling you, they were well on their way to locking down, pun intended, a lot of things. And worldwide. Like, go back in your memory to that time. It all stopped with that. That's when they pulled back and started rebranding their reset. It's a rebrand, in my opinion. They just rebranded it. They didn't change it. They didn't walk away from it. They didn't step away from any of that stuff, in my opinion. And a number of others I know who definitely are out there doing way better work than I am that are saying this. Don't know of many Orthodox people that are like flat out saying some of this stuff, but there are more than a few people out there. Those definitely, like, they're definitely saying this. It just got rebranded. Agenda 21 from the 90s got rebranded. Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, it just got rebranded, guys. That's, in my opinion, it got rebranded by the same people that we're talking about, the social engineers, the marketers, and everybody that we've been talking about. Okay? They didn't forget how to manipulate you. Even the book Propaganda was written over 70 years ago. That outlines it very well, the rebranding. A good example would be the rebranding of fluoride. Edward Bernays took toxic waste and put it in your toothpaste. Took toxic waste that is not good for you at all. That's a byproduct of the aluminum industry that was getting caught up. All the dust was getting caught up in their stacks in the aluminum factory plants, and they didn't know what to do with it. It's not the same fluoride that's found in nature. And then they put it into products and just rebranded it and told you it was good for you. There's a great interview of Edward Bernays on, I think it was David Letter or Johnny Carson. I can't remember, one of those guys. And he showed up with a lab coat, a doctor's coat, like a lab coat. And he said, all you need to do is wear this and tell people what to do. And they'll do that. That's old. You don't think that you think they forgot all, excuse me, you think they forgot all this stuff? So back to like the organic uprisings of like, Occupy Wall Street and the truckers, those were grassroots movements that scared the pants off of those ruling elite. At that point, they had to retract. At that point, they had to rebrand everything, change the branding, change the heroes. Just change the character in the movie. Make the hero an anti-hero. Make the anti-hero a hero. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to be specific, but certain characters that you're politically seeing, you're seeing similar characters in other places, and they were acting like that before certain people got put into the limelight. So if they're rebranded all this stuff, if they're just changing the marketing of it, like Edward Bernays did with fluoride, or cigarette smoking and the feminists, so so cigarette companies can double their income, wouldn't they apply these exact same things to combat a grassroots movement like Occupy? Well, they did, didn't they? They did. They absolutely did. It was the uprising right after that stopped happening, right? A couple years after Occupy and all that stuff, you started to get an influx, more so an emphasis on identity culture. Again, what did it say in here? What did it say in here? The best way to do that is change your identity, right? Where it says here, however, in order to change mankind's behavior away from industrial production, the complete extirpation of mankind's inner sense of identity and the tearing out of mankind's innermost soul and the placement in the vacant space of an artificial synthetic pseudo-soul. Well, we've already outlined it. We all agree. I think if you're still listening to this, we agree that our actual innermost sense of identity is the fact that we're created in the image and likeness of God. By changing that and then creating a little empty space, and then within it putting in this artificial synthetic pseudo-soul, which is connected to spiritualism and all this stuff. Well, the beginning of it was way back in the past with any ism you may choose. You could pick many isms, but it's very clear with feminism. But you could see it before that ism in other isms that require subjectivism to reign supreme over objectivism, like communism, right? So the modern way of doing all of this stuff is now they made that subjective war. They brought it to your doorstep with identity politics, which really started to climb around 2013, 14, 15. By the time you get the election in 2016, it starts really, percolating and bubbling and getting ready for a boil. And we're in hard boil now. We don't even know how to identify anything. Everything's subjective, right? Now, if that's the case, and to go back to what I'm saying, all you have to do is play with people on that level, and they're really easy to manipulate and really easy to get them to fall into traps. And they're very, very good at it. So my only thing is, I don't think they're as dumb as some people think they are. And I God bless them. I get why some people think that they're dumb. I definitely am not black-pilled. So I don't think, there's no hope here or any of that stuff. We clearly have a direction on we have guidance on what direction to take through the church and all that stuff. Okay. And I just want to say that if these things that we've kind of talked about a little bit today, and I jumped all over the place, I have tariffs written down. John Coleman mentions tariffs. A lot of the talking points I'm hearing politically out there are outlined very clearly in John Coleman's book, The Committee of 300, and a few other books. A lot of the things that are being said there, they're not presented in an actual way, especially see, if I go any further, I'm going to go into specifics on finance and all of that stuff. Maybe I should get guests on to talk about that. I have been chatting a little bit with Derek Bros privately. I have had him on my show. I have met him. I know him personally. He's a good dude. We don't agree on everything. There's a lot we don't agree on. He's a vegan. His views on spirituality are a lot closer to my old views. I had told him to read this at one point. He was on my show. We talked a little bit about this and a few other things, unfortunately. But in terms of how his geopolitical views and how he sees that, I agree with him quite a bit. I agree with James Corbett quite a bit. I agree with some of the other people that get criticized. I understand some of the criticisms, by the way. I do get them. I'm not 100% with everybody that I'm mentioning. Catherine Austin Fitz. Whitney Webb. Cyprian from The Royal Path. A lot of these guys, people don't all agree on many subjects, but they definitely agree on the direction that the financial situation will take, the direction that the rebranding of CBDCs, the rebranding of CBDCs, the rebranding of CBDCs, the rebranding of CBDs, the rebranding of digital IDs, the rebranding of these things, the rebranding of these things, the rebranding of these things. Their point of view, I definitely agree on. Also, I'll point the fact that the only Orthodox person on that list is Cyprian from The Royal Path. We definitely have had private talks on this subject. I definitely agree highly with his point of view on this subject. And everyone I mentioned, to some degree or another, they don't all agree. I mean, many of them have called each other out on certain, details on how it's going to be put forth and all that stuff. They don't fully agree, right? They don't fully agree. I know Cyprian has disagreed with a couple of those names and some of those names, but overall, their way of seeing how this is going to be played out is very similar. And I will point to every one of them, except I'm not sure about Cyprian, so I'll leave him out of this. Everyone else on that list, before the situations occurred in 2020, we were all talking about it, knowing that it was going to happen. And from the minute it kind of started happening, it was clear, So I would say I would listen to these individuals because they were very good at seeing the future. And we're talking about like they were talking. Privately, I was talking about a lot of it too for like over 15 years. In some cases, in other cases, about 10 to 15 years. And I know that for a fact because I had been following all these characters for a long time. So if they had the foresight to be able to see this, they might have some foresight on what's coming too. So to get to the point of the movie we were watching, if you changed all the characters and flipped them and inverted them, because that's a very beloved technique, inversions, you could lead people into a place where, as it's clearly outlined here, I keep reading this because I think it's so important. What does it say here? It says, what is the purpose of these behavior modifications, you may ask? It is to bring about forced change in our way of life, which is occurring, without our agreements and without ever realizing what is happening. Well, does that not sound like 3 boxes they want to check off when they do things? It does to me, because it's clearly outlined in the changing image of man. It's clearly outlined in the Tavistock documents that go back way, 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 way back. It's clearly illustrated in the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays. It's clearly. Gustave Le Bon mentions it in 1895. So they were aware of this. And that's why the Socratic method is very useful, is if you are having a conversation with someone, if you get them to have the conclusion you want them to have, and they think they came up with that conclusion, they're far more likely to accept it. So in a debate or a conversation or in a manipulation campaign, you feed them information so that they, in turn, think they're the ones that came up with that. And you just don't tell them that, well, I nudged you. Back to the book Nudged. I nudged you. It's a nudging technique. You nudge that individual. All of a sudden they're like, "Whoa, this is my idea. I'm okay to take this idea. It's mine. I came up with this idea." Right? So here, again, they want to do all this stuff without you knowing about it. So if that's the case, and they're aware of all this stuff, to bring about forced change in our way of life, which has happened in the last 4 years, without our agreement, a lot of us didn't agree, and without ever realizing what is happening, some of us knew what was happening the last couple of years. So how do you deal, let's wrap this up, how do you deal with those individuals that knew what was happening during Occupy Wall Street, which we talked about, that during the COVIDs that has happened in the last couple of years? What do you do with those renegades out there that kind of were figuring things out? What do you do about those renegades that figured out the financial system back then, what was going down in G-Bar Town in 2020, and all that stuff? Then the grassroots situations of the truckers saying, right? How do you deal with this thing coming at you, where you can't get them to stop sharing information? You can't get them to get other people. You can't stop them to getting other people thinking. You can't stop them from making serious strides, trying as hard as you can to call them every which name in the book. You get them to switch sides. You take apart the community and you get half of them to switch and flip on each other, and you put everyone in little boxes, and you have a general idea of one set of boxes and a general idea of another set of boxes. Example is, you might have a whole segment of people that agree that they don't want that or they don't want this, or they don't want to buy any of the narrative of 2020. Well, how do you get them to all flip on each other? Well, you find another issue that they're going to argue about. For example, the situations that happened in the Middle East a couple years ago, when all of a sudden the same people that were talking about freedom and against cancel culture were asking for people to be canceled. Right? All of a sudden you take heroes and you make them anti-heroes. For example, one of them just got pardoned. For whatever reason that person got pardoned. Why would he get pardoned? They got pardoned. He was at one time a hero to some, to a lot. Then you do the flipperoo. Politically, they did a flipperoo. In terms of technocrats, they did a flipperoo. By doing all this, if you're to look at this as a marketing campaign and not look at it as like the real life to us, it's kind of brilliant because you're getting everyone to agree to something without knowing what's being agreed upon, your consent. Then you're also getting them to do the ultimate goal of achieving your goal by tearing everything down so you can build it back up. Genius. Then you're getting all of them to make certain investments with a system that is a system that's not understood by most people, myself included, which I could bring up Cyprus real quick there. When you realized what governance and banking is, you would see it best in Cyprus with the Kurema and what they did in Cyprus. That's when people realized when you put your money in the bank, you don't own the money. Because they told everyone that had anything over 100 thou, they're taking it. And they did. To pay off a debt. To some BS debt system. So, the Cyprus-Greece thing, not because I'm Greek Cypriot, but it's just the best way of understanding what happened, what's happening, and what's coming. Because it's a really good example. I personally think Cyprus has been used for a very long time as a test place to pull off certain things. There was a private conversation when we were talking about some religious matters and governance, and I think Cyprus reflects that as well, and a few other things. Even how that. So you could even find Kissinger speaking about Cyprus and using it as a pawn. Let's not forget it's a Commonwealth country, so the Brits definitely understood that. The Tavistock stuff, very definitely. I mean, because Orthodoxy is clearly the enemy to the New World Order, as I have always agreed with this. Oh, no. Let me backtrack. No, I have not. That's a mistake. Sorry. I'm going to backtrack. No. Backtrack that. I didn't always look at it that way. I'm sorry. That was a mistake. What I was trying to get at is Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphou. That's the first time I said it in English. Yes. I was trying so hard to say it properly. He put out a video a couple days ago talking about Orthodoxy is the enemy to the New World Order. I fully agree with that. And his whys, he mentions kind of a few things here. Now, that being true, which I believe it is true, they're going to have to deal with that. Cyprus and Greece are countries steeped in those traditions. Greece and Cyprus have also been steeped in the tradition of being guerrilla warfares, like anarchists in that sense, not anarchists, but in the sense of like get out of here. We're talking about a tiny country that took on Mussolini and won, with a bunch of farmers and literally shepherds with like muskets in many cases and basic rifles, took on Mussolini's monster army at their peak in World War II and handed them their butts. They did the same with the Ottomans. And it's just part of our nature. They did the same with the British in Cyprus, with Eoka. this tiny little country, legitimately grassroots was like, get the hell out of here. Sorry again for the middle finger to the Brits, and won, got them out. We're idiots and we always fight and we do a lot of dumb things as a culture, but we also draw the line at certain points, and when we do come together, it's dangerous. You may not believe me. You may think that I'm just saying this because I'm biased. Believe me, there are a lot of things Greeks have done in the past and now and will do in the future that I'm not a fan of. Not every Greek person would agree with me on a lot of things. In fact, they probably would dislike me on a lot of factors. So I might be biased on some things, but I'm acknowledging my bias. And I'm not saying this because I think I'm biased. I'm thinking it's just part of history that you could see there, that there is something about that story. I think it is one of the reasons why God, I think it's because of the Greek language and the way it could be broken down. That's why. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is in 1821, when we got independence from the Ottomans and the way that happened, and a bunch of this stuff, it was definitely noted by the elites that that's one race you gotta cap those boys and girls. You gotta, right? And then to throw Orthodoxy in the mix of that, you have a cocktail for disaster for them. But we're also easily manipulated, more so than other Orthodox countries. So that works against us. That definitely works against us. We're far more easily manipulated than the rest of the Orthodox nations, as far as like in just a general thing to say that. Because we love to fight each other more than everybody else. I would say more than everybody. I know everyone's like, no, Serbs love to fight. They do, but they don't. Greeks love to fight amongst each other. They love it. And historically, that's how they've been kept down. Historically, even before the Ottomans, that's how you keep a Greek person down, is you get them to fight amongst each other. They love that crap. Now, to give you an example, because I am going towards the end of them, I'm creeping towards Cyprus. So there is a point to this, a bit of a side tangent rant, is after World War II, during World War II, Mussolini tries to invade Greece, thought it was going to be easy. Hitler tells him, oh yeah, it's going to be easy. Go for it, brother. He goes over there. He gets his butt handed to him. The Greeks not only kick his butt, but start moving him out of their, and then they start taking territories and being like, no, man, get out of here. So they start going for it, right? And then it required Germany, because the Italians just couldn't, to end up coming down to Greece, to having to deal with those crazy Greek bastards. And Hitler had a decent, okay time, not as easy as he thought either, taking most of Greece. And then he gets to Crete, the island of Crete. I've told the story before, but it's important to understand. And he just couldn't take it. The Nazis, those guys, had a very difficult time taking the island of Crete. Because the thing about Greeks, when it comes to battle and stuff like that, we're stupid like that. We're nuts like that. They do just nuts things. To this day, the traditional uniform of the Cretans has which is why they call Cretans, like, it's a kind of like, are you nuts? Are you a Cretan? You Cretan? You know, it's like an insult. This is where it comes from. And they had their knives in their belts, on their waists. And as those, because they couldn't take the island they couldn't land on the island because they were nuts. They're just blasting them, right, with like rudimentary equipment. And they would try to land, like, we're talking about crazy people, like, they're nuts, Cretans. So then they started to like try to parachute on the island as well. And they would just sit there with the knives in their belts. They would sit there in their mouths, and then just one by one, just go. As the guy was parachuting down, he would just see the Cretan waiting. They're trying to shoot at him, couldn't find him, couldn't see him because they're hiding. And then all of a sudden, as they landed, sliced their throats, one after the other. They just couldn't take the thing. To the point that I'm trying to make, that when William Churchill, like him or don't like him, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I definitely agree with Martyr Maid, so don't worry. I'm on your side on this guy. Not a fan of that guy. Mr. Churchill makes a declaration that from that day forward, because, hold on, sorry, let me back down. So the Germany having to go to Greece to deal with the situation, put the timeline back for them to be able to invade Russia. And by the time they went to Russia, they were dealing with harsh winters because they were postponed in Greece, which led the Allies to be able to give them a one-up and help them deal with these dudes, these guys, with the Hitler's guys. So then Churchill says, from this day forward, we will not say that Greeks fight like heroes. We will say that heroes fight like Greeks. You can Google that up and you can find that that's where that he was said that. And he even promised, because Cyprus has always wanted to be connected back to Greece from time immemorial, and it has not been part of Greece since time immemorial, and they wanted to go back. And he even agreed that the Brits would give Cyprus back to Greece as a thank you. There was other times where they promised Greece back and Cyprus back to Greece. That's a different subject altogether. Greeks are extremely corrupt people that love to fight with each other. They're horrible like that, and that's what causes our downfall. But the point is, when they unite, they're hardcore. Also, they're so hardcore that Winston Churchill made that claim. Also, it shows that there's that connection. Also, you fast forward to the Turks, which I'm just going to have to fast forward all that because that's too much to get into. How they ended up taking back, how they even got the British out of Cyprus was interesting altogether. And it started because of a promise made to give Cyprus back to Greece, and they wouldn't do it. The country of Cyprus takes a vote and has an over 90% vote yes to unify with Greece. They still wouldn't allow that. Long story. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into it too far, but they decide that we're going to say no. We're going to do something about this. Also, they love the word no, which is why the Greek celebration of that event in World War II was called Ochi, which means no in Greek, because when Mussolini said, give up your country, whatever, they said no. They literally said this, and they went and did their thing. This takes me back to the economic situation. This takes me back to the world affairs. This takes me back to Tavistock Institute and all that stuff. Cyprus and Greece were used constantly, consistently as a place to practice all their future events, which you're seeing played out before you right now. Why? Because of all these things. And I also believe because the Orthodox Church is intertwined with that culture. But also the Greek is an idiot, and you can easily get them to betray their own people. You can easily get them to become liberal. You can easily get them to do stupid things, which is what we're criticized for amongst Orthodox people. And I totally agree. But I please beg you, if you're going to do that criticism, please don't forget there's guys like Metropolitan Neofito. My mistake. There are clergy like Metropolitan Neofito out there who represent the old school way of doing things, who represent the St. Paisios, the St. Porphyrios, St. Jacobo of Evia, who he interacted with. He represents those old school Greeks. Now, why this economic situation? Why this with Cyprus and Greece? Well, because of all the things I've outlined in these last 2 hours that I've been jabbering, coupled with the fact that there's grassroots uprisings, very similar to the ones that I described with the Occupy Wall Street, very similar to the truckers. You have this ethos, you have this way of being, and you have them in Europe. And the thing with the Greek Revolution in 1821, it sprung forth a bunch of other revolutions later on. Not like the French Revolution, but like legitimate ones. They're aware of this. They're aware of the elite, the dark elite, are aware of the Orthodox connection here. And by playing the people of Cyprus and playing the people of Greece against each other, and then ultimately as test grounds, they could learn a lot on how to apply a lot of these techniques and tactics worldwide. What happened to Cyprus economically during that time, during the crisis in 2007, 7, 8, 9, 10, that time frame, is a good way of understanding what's to come. Now, I will just call upon his name because he will give me some credit and clout. The only guy I've ever really heard break down the Cyprus thing was Corbett, the Corbett report. James Corbett. His referencing of sources is like pretty close to unmatched. All the other names I mentioned earlier are very good at that. He's great. He would break that down. He will explain to you what happened there and the whys. So back to the whole point of social engineering, culture creation, creating a simulacrum, creating an adult internal amusement park, finding ways of changing your identity, taking it away from God and who you really are and your true identity, and inverting that, creating a little space there for them to fill a pseudo soul into there, as we've just read. These individuals did not forget how to manipulate you at all. These individuals did not forget on how to abuse you at all. This all started way before these humans even agreed. And if you really think about what I said earlier, I tried to go, be careful. If you look at the Luciferian, the satanic, whatever word you are comfortable with, whatever way you want to look at that, the bad guy in the Bible, that guy, if you look at his techniques, of deception, of manipulation, the father of lies, if you look at how that was done in the Garden of Eden, and you look at all of this stuff and the inversions of things like the virtues to make them passions, then focus on the passions, change people's identity because everything's subjective. If you do all this stuff, you start to create literally exactly what is required, wanted, and needed by the dark forces to do what they need to do in their view. And oftentimes, we may want to pretend that we're not being manipulated in that way. But I assure you, these individuals have been studying you for so long that they didn't forget that 2 years ago, a year ago. Now, they didn't forget that. If you agree with James Corbett, if you agree with Jay Dyer, I left his name out of this. Let me just say something about Jay on purpose because I didn't want to bring... out of all the people I've mentioned earlier, the James Corbett, Jay Dyer, obviously, my heart is there the most. He breaks things down on a level that's nuts and crazy and amazing and all that stuff. I left him out as an example for a particular reason, and not a bad reason, actually a good reason, a reason of respect, to be honest with you, just as a little caveat there. But if we're understanding all these things that we're describing here, and we look at it from the perspective that these people probably didn't forget how to do all this stuff and didn't forget that 2 years ago, a year ago, and definitely not now. And if you agree with Jay Dyer on Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, if you agree with James Corbett, they don't have the same spiritual beliefs, but they both fully agree on Tragedy and Hope. They both fully agree on everything, mentioned by Jay and others about Quigley and others. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, let me know. I'll tell you. But I'm pretty sure you guys are well educated. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If it's described clear as day how the system works, and how that there's a ruling body that we don't know who they are, but they're not definitely the people you think they are, and that elections and all that stuff are kind of not what you think they are, and that they're really based on narratives, the outcomes of them, if they're real. They're based on narratives. And if these people have been studying this stuff and have been, scripting our lives very similar to a movie, very similar to a Disney situation, why wouldn't they know how to manipulate us with the current news feed you see? Why would you think that? Like, we talked about making them abusing you and forcing you to change, without you knowing it. We talked about how that's clearly outlined in the book Propaganda by Bernays, Sigmund Freud's great-grandson, whose great-great-great-grandson owns Netflix. Like, we all know this stuff. So my question is, what if they just keep you thinking you're winning and string you along to think you're winning? What if they use the Socratic method against you? What if they're using the exact same tactics that have been outlined even in the Bible? What if they didn't forget this stuff and they made a hero, an anti-hero, a hero? What if some of the solutions that you're given, and the reason why I brought up Quigley, is as clear as day. He illustrates perfectly with sources and evidence. And Jay Dyer, you can go to Jay. Jay knows way more. Like, I don't go to Jay. Don't go to James Corbett. Don't come to me on this stuff. Like, it's clearly written that it's an illusion. If that's an illusion, and it was clearly outlined here by the Tavistock Institute that they want to make these changes without you knowing them, and actually have you willfully give up your identity, change it without knowing what the outcome is, like what the repercussions are. Wouldn't they just do it this way? Like, you may think you know what I'm talking about, and you may know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to avoid that particular situation, examples of heroes and anti-heroes, because I really don't want to push those buttons. And it's not because I'm afraid to. I have no problem. My problem is that we need less arguing amongst each other. Like we were talking about there. I mean, I could look in here and show you where they talk about putting people in different compartments and having building of echo chambers and having them scream and holler at each other till they take each other apart. Like, these ruling elite don't give a crap if you're who you believe or you don't believe out there, politically, intellectually, spiritually. They just want you fighting. They don't really care about all that. That's 101. That's literally in Gustav Le Bon's book, The Psychology of Crowds. It's like the opening of it. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is, the reason why I'm avoiding some of those things is because we don't need. We do have a lot of hope in front of us, and we do have a lot of good things happening right now as we speak. I mean, it may be hard to have discernment in this, and I'm not really sure my discernment's all that good anymore. The reason why I'm holding back on saying certain things is because some of the hope that's coming out of some of these corners of the newsfeed and online and in our communities, some of that hope, looking for progress, looking for solutions, all of that is good in the sense that it will spark, hopefully down the road at some point, solutions-based thinking. And some people that are saying a few little things here and there, when things start to be a little bit more clear as to what's going on, they might be more likely to go, hey, well, you were saying this cool thing a couple months ago or a year ago or so. What do you think about this now? What's going on now? And then maybe because those people, like I mentioned earlier, some of those names were well aware of what was going to happen in 2020 before it happened. That's how I knew about it, was from all those individuals I've already named. Because they're telling me that something is happening around me currently, and a lot of the stuff in the newsfeed is not happening, and that the resets that we've heard about in the past were just rebranded, from the IDs to the CBDCs to all of that stuff. It was just totally rebranded. And actually, if you look at a lot of what's happening in the world affairs currently, right now, they fit very, 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 very close, if not identical, to events that occurred in 1929. Which led to the Depression. What type of depression? The Great Depression. Which, by the way, our numbers are worse than the Great Depressions from any way you look at it. Which led to World War II. But before all that, you had the Shoeshine Boy. Do you guys know the story of the Shoeshine Boy? Wow, I feel like I'm preaching at you guys. I'm not trying to be condescending. I just realized that might be condescending. I was just getting into my Mano getting excited character. My apologies if that came out condescending. I don't mean it to be. I will say this though: the Shoeshine Boy. Do you guys know the story of the Shoeshine Boy? For those that do, awesome. Correct me if I make a mistake. For those that don't, this is the story of the Shoeshine Boy in like 2 seconds. Joe Kennedy, father of JFK and the rest of the Kennedy family. We all know his past, but one of the things he liked to dabble in was the stock market. So the stock market was something that was, we should maybe do a history on the stock market one day. I don't even want to be talking about these subjects. I want to talk about our faith and all that stuff. So probably won't be like planning any of these streams. I don't know. If anything I've said today, you guys want me to break down and some sort of thing, let me know. But I'll finish the story of the shoe shine boy. I'll conclude today's stream in real quick if I can. Shoe shine boy, Joe Kennedy. So if you guys don't know the history of the stock market, let me just put it this way. There's evidence of it having been tampered from the get-go. A lot of the names that even are out there now in popular pop culture today were around then, from the JP Morgans onward. And there was a couple of fabricated pump and dump situations. Listen to the marketing terms. That's a one that they use very commonly now in the crypto era, pump and dump. But the pump and dump is old. The pump and dump, there were a couple. There were some in the early 1900s, 1907, I believe, and a few others, but I'm not going to get into those, which is one of the reasons why it was an excuse to create the Federal Reserve in 1913. But anyways, we're not talking about those. But one of the things was the Roaring Twenties was a beautiful way of getting people to take all that extra money from the Roaring Twenties and their great economic boom that was after a war. Took all that money, and they were just trying to convince the average individual to start putting them on the casino of the stock exchanges. The American system at that point had a lot of independent banks and a lot of trusts, credit unions. The banking industry was kind of more likened to like your favorite store to shop at. What do I get benefits from the store? People would invest their money in that way in banks. Well, they needed to consolidate all this stuff. The run for a central bank isn't a new thing. It wasn't even something that came up in 1913. The idea and concept of a central bank goes way back. Wow, I'm going off. There's a couple of incidents in American history where you saw that during the 1800s they tried to bring a central bank to the American way of life. Back to the shoeshine boy. So, Roaring Twenties, they're trying to kind of advertise this idea of the average person taking their money and putting it into this casino called a stock market, and then the elite types, whatever you want to call them, pump and dump. Okay, and they use they would try to find tactics and ways of using, borrowing rates. They tried to use ways of using psychology, creating prosperity to convince people to do certain things, to eventually down the road, with the average person not noticing it happening to them, have them inflate that dollar, because that's the best way to steal from someone. You don't even have to take the money out of their hands. You just make that money worthless. You know what I mean? Like you can hold, I had a whole bunch of pesos here. Here's 10 pesos. This is what 10 pesos look like. You can have this person hold this 10 peso coin in their hand, and then you can adjust the worth of it. You don't even have to take it out of their hands, and you have stolen it. So back to the pattern of the Roaring Twenties, you have this thing. Then you convince all these people to start putting their money in this casino. Average people, that is. And then all of a sudden, you have to find ways of controlling their psychology. So they started their version of social media at the time by the way that they would use financial sections of newspapers. You know what I mean? You had like your paper boys out there tossing them out, playing with people's emotions, fear and such, to buy, sell, this and that, to create this inflated market and all that thing. You know what I'm saying? All that thing. And then all of a sudden, the average person starts talking less about, some sporting event and some like, hey, you know what that guy did? That kind of like 1920s talk and whatever, and have them look at the markets, the stock markets, as their, salvation, like way out. This not informative. Like they kind of made them addicted to like talking about markets and all that stuff, and the stock market by using the newspapers and all that to create all that hype. So then all of a sudden, people that like couple years before 1929, before 1929, that would be talking about like, hey, did you know that Charlie got drunk yesterday at the bar? As all of a sudden, that same guy is now talking about, hey, did you buy that stock that went up? And did you do that? And that average person is now not interested in the daily sporting events and gossip of the town, but interested in this thing about this casino called the stock market. So now, Joe Kennedy, father of JF Kennedy and all the rest, who you guys know his background with the underworld, and of course we overlooked prohibition and all that stuff, but that's okay. I can't go too long here. That individual who's very much a part of the pump and dump theft scam of how to inflate and deflate money, how to use markets to and as theory, how to get all these. Remember we talked about like there's many banks that were like local private banks and credit unions. How do we get rid of all this stuff so we can get one step closer to having the populace need us more? Number one. Number two, take away the power from those little micro banks and buy them all up at a cheap rate. And how do we take all of these other independent businesses, because the original idea of the United States of America was not based on big business. It was based on small mom and pop businesses. That's actually how it was designed. And how do you get rid of all these like middle to small mom and pop stores and businesses? How do you get all that stuff and start to consolidate stuff? Well, you bankrupt people and buy everything at cheap. You inflate things, and then you dump it and you buy everything at cheap. At the same time, it serves a few other goals. Regulation, government intervention. That's how you get the great deal and all that stuff. Social insurance. That's how you get all that stuff, right? How you take the gold. 1934. That happened. Shoeshine boy. Ready? Here it is. So, Joe decides to sit down and get his shoe shined. Doesn't know when a good time to sell his stocks, because he knows it's going to crash at some point, because they've all discussed it. He's well aware of the pump and dump. He's still pumping. How am I going to know when to dump? How do I get out before the average person knows to get out? We've done this before, and we have a track record. He's thinking, so he knows how the track record works. He knows from the earlier pump and dumps, because there were plenty. Sitting down, getting his shoes shined, and the shoe shine boy starts giving him stock advice. The shoe shine boy is giving him advice on the stock market, on economics, finances. He got up, sold it, because he knew if it got to the point where this kid is interested in this subject and knows about it, it's time to get out, because the average, the lay of the lay of the lay of the all that, it's now pop culture. It's out it's like number one on the charts. It's like you know what I mean? And what happens after something peaks, it drops. And the Shushan boy gave him his indication to fly. I'm seeing that Shushan boy scenario and situation on a lot of different subjects. You know, whether it's where to put your cash. And that's even better way of taking control. I'm not going down there. We own some stuff in those markets. We are playing in those markets, but I know I'm looking for the shoe shine boy. When I got into those markets, the crypto stuff, a while back, a way while back. I knew 2025 was the year to get the out, and I did say that to Manny and to anyone that I was with, even during the events of the COVIDicons of 2020 and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, 2025 is going to be a benchmark year. Based on all the stuff I've kind of touched upon in this jibber jabber of stuff. Now, this does not mean I'm against some of the narrative that's going out there that's hopeful. I mean, there is a lot to be hopeful about. A lot of political decisions that have been made in the last couple of months have bought us time, so I'm grateful. But have also, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, guys. This is just literally my opinion, okay? It has bought us time. What we do at that time absolutely matters. And I guess I haven't identified what you're being nudged to, and I'm avoiding that. Let's say in the 90s they wanted something called an North American Union. Let's say that's what they wanted. Like, I know I'm hearing that now, but I remember we were talking about this in 2018 with some of the names I'm referring to, and we were talking about how it was interesting that they stopped that narrative of talking about that. And that was in 2018, but it fits ideally and perfectly with the overall idea of world governance and one world, all this stuff. It was like, and everybody knew this. Everybody knew this back in the 90s and early 2000s, up until the mid 2000s. Everybody was talking about that. Everybody talked about the Amero dollar. Everybody talked about that they wanted a North American Union, the beginnings of which was NAFTA. They wanted a collapse of like all things globally to put into place some sort of financial situation. It looks to me this is where we're headed, like in many things. So I personally believe that most of the stuff that we're being warned about in the 2020, 2021 from a lot of those names and other people has just been rebranded. Back to my point about the grassroots movements, the two that I illustrated was the Canadian truckers. That definitely bought us time again, but also let those elite guys know, hey, you have to change. Either you change your marketing campaign or you give up. That's what they took from that. They know they can't give up. So they just changed their marketing campaign. That's all that was. It was just a marketing campaign change. And then they just went back to their Hollywood scripting skills and how to change narratives, very similar to Bernays's propaganda and the fluoride example and all that stuff. And they just said, okay, let's make those people that organically did create these grassroots movements. Again, example, Occupy Wall Street, example, truckers, example, all the people that during that time period were like, we're not going to do this whole thing that you want us to do, that and all that stuff, and chopping kids' parts off and we weren't doing that stuff, right? So what the best way to control that group, again, going back to the Tavistock Institute, again, reading that very important paragraph and a half that I've read over and over and over again, okay? The best way to do it, again, it says in here that they want to make these changes in your identity. And of course, for us, our identity is created in the image and likeness of God, and believing in the hierarchy of how we see things as Orthodox Christians, from the family, the patriarchy in general, and all of that stuff, right? So the best way to do that is have people think that they're not, not know that these changes are happening and not know what decisions they're making as they change their identity. So what if the best way to do that is take the people that are pushing back the most, that actually did take some punches and went whap, whap, and just gave some serious like Mike Tyson knockout punches with the truckers thing and all that stuff, as we saw worldwide, that like went everywhere from the country that was least expected to create such waves, Canada, And then all of a sudden it spreads out everywhere. They learned that. So what did they do? They rebranded everything. And how about if you make the people that are pushing back, who are actually pushing for good, what if you make them think they're winning? What if you make them think they're winning? What if you made them think they're winning? Would they stop pushing back? Yes. Would they change how they push back? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, you would. Oh, yes, you would. Some of them will continue to push back, but if they don't know how to push back, their pushback doesn't matter. And what if their pushback fits your agenda? What if you just reverse the roles? Reverse the hero and the anti-hero. Just flip them, invert them. Why? Because Satan loves inversions. So that would be the best way I would do it. That's how I would mess with people. If I wanted to mess with people, I would just take the people that are winning and then tell them, oh, you won. Get comfortable. Comfort kills. That's why, struggle well. And then all of a sudden you flip this, you think that you give them the impression they're winning. They give up. They stop doing all those things. They don't see the pattern that's formulating in front of them. They don't see that what's coming. They don't see that tidal wave. And they just walk into the prison thinking the prison was literally the ship that's taking them to freedom, or whatever analogy you can give that's better than me, because that was a bad analogy. Okay? If you do that, you rebrand all the bad buzzwords from before, and you give them different names. You get rid of the people that were, chanting those resets before. Like, where's Klaus? And a few others. Make a bad guy a good guy, make a good guy bad guy, flipping all that stuff. People are confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to look. They don't know where to punch. They don't know where to hit back. They're just hitting everywhere or the wrong places. You know what I'm saying? And back to the shoeshine boy. You get everyone to go into this fake casino and you pull the rug under them. Then they go to... Then all of a sudden, they don't have choices on what decisions to make for their families and the people around them. They have to make some difficult, wrong decisions and give their consent, as we mentioned earlier, to do so. They have to give their consent and say, oh, okay, I'll take your UBI. I'll take it. Universal basic income is a big, hot subject in some countries. Well, you're going to take that. You do need the extra couple thousand, don't you? I do. Help me out. Okay. I'm not quitting my job, though. No one's asking to. We're just going to give you this money. How are you going to get it? What ID? I don't know. Right? The rebranding of it. Again, some of the names that definitely agree with a lot of things I said today, I've already mentioned. One of them being Cyprian from the Royal Path. Maybe I'll see if I can get him to jump on. There is no need to lose hope. It doesn't mean because if you disagree with some of the very exciting narratives out there that make you feel hopeful, just because you maybe agree or disagree, whatever, it mean if you disagree that means you're black-pilled and that you don't see hope. That's not it. I hope if anyone's kind of tuned in towards the end, go back and listen to some of it. It might make a little bit more sense. The important part, I'll just reiterate by reading this paragraph again, because I think it fits well to illustrate a lot of the things we're talking about. And I think that is the point. The bad guys, and I'd go as far back as the bad guys as in the incident in the Garden of Eden, that bad guy. And I think that the tricks are the same. They haven't changed. The techniques may have improved. We've gotten stupider on some levels and smarter on other levels. Every aspect of the mental and psychological life of people on the planet was profiled, recorded, stored into computer systems. Above the closely Cooperating groups of social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations preside the elite of powerful members of the oligarchy comprised mostly of the old Venetian black nobility. Those are the original rulers of the corporation idea that I was talking about earlier. They're the ones that implemented the first two corporations, the Dutch and the Dutch East Indian Company and sorry, this gets heavy. That's your black nobility, is your banking families, your original ones, not the ones that you know the names of. What is the purpose of these behavior modifications, you may ask? It is to bring about forced change to our way of life without our agreement and without ever realizing what is happening to us. The ultimate goal being the complete extirpation of mankind's inner sense of identity, the tearing out of humanity's innermost soul, and the placement in the vacant space of an artificial synthetic pseudo-soul. It's very similar to the goals of the Luciferian types. It is. However, in order to change mankind's behavior away from industrial production into spiritualism and to bring us willfully into the world of post-industrial era, zero growth, zero progress, one must force first a change in mankind's self-image, its fundamental conception of what we are. Thus, the image of man appropriate to the new era must be sought, synthesized, and wired into mankind's brain. I think that illustrates the mission statement of the oligarchs given direction to the social engineers who've gone out there and have made these changes at a slow rate, took their time patiently, understand us on some things on a deep level. What they don't understand is our connection to God, our creator, our connection to our church, communities, families, that they don't understand. They don't even understand how we're still around, and they haven't been able to do a better job of what they... So anyways, my point is that I don't know what my overall point is, other than to say that I just wanted to ramble off about some of these things that I'm seeing out there, which, you know, it's great that people are out there talking about a lot of these subjects, and it's good that that a lot of people are sharing different points of views and ideas and thoughts. That's great. That's fine. I think it's important, you know, on some level to consider that maybe you're being nudged. Reference to earlier in the stream for those that are just jumping in. You're being nudged to do what they want ultimately. I don't know. It just seems very clear to me. Very, very clear. And just be careful. Maybe starting more conversations like this and figuring out how we can apply discernment. I don't know. I don't like talking about this stuff as much as I used to, or at all. I used to love this. Yeah, if you go back and you watch that interview I did with David Whitehead, 2021, you might see a different version of me. I was definitely a different person. And to tie into that conversation, that presentation I did at the Anarchapulco event, one of the things that was interesting about that was Nah, it's all good. I think we're done. I'm just gonna look in the chats and see if there's anything going on. I think I'm getting hungry and I want to go eat. Forgive me if this was a all over the place thing. I think somewhere in the middle it started to kind of come together, and if you follow through some of those weird strings I was dropping, I do find a way to tie them all together. If you've gotten this far live, I appreciate it. Thank you for sticking with me. Please let me know in any which way you feel comfortable doing so, whether it's in the comments or privately messaging me or whatever. What do you think about some of the things I was saying? And I generally mean this. I don't know. Let me know. Like, do you want me to break some of this stuff down? I'm not sure I will say yes, because I'm just don't know if I want to be putting out that. I don't know. I'll consider. Let me know if you want me to break some of this stuff down. Do you want details on some of the weird event? Like, I brought up a lot of stuff. I jumped all over the place. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And I do want to say this last thing and make sure that that is said. If you got this far and you do kind of like what I'm saying, or you get what I'm saying, or interested in what I'm saying, or any of that stuff, go back and watch more of it and just see if you can follow me to this point and if it makes any sense. But I don't really go, like, a lot of people have asked me to get into details, which I didn't even today, on some of the stuff, you know, whether it be geopolitics, the politics in the U.S., Canada, Mexico thing, whether I agree with, I don't know, what's going on over here in this country or that country. A lot of people were asking about financial stuff. How do I view cryptocurrency? What do I think about Bitcoin? How do I view, the rebranding of central bank digital currencies? Do I see it that way? Do I agree with this person? Do I agree with that person? What are your takes? I get these questions a lot, especially from people that knew me back in the day, that knew that I was like obsessed with the stuff before it was like super popular. And I don't talk about it for a couple of reasons. I don't even talk about my occult stuff so much, is because I don't know if it does me good. I don't know. But then I've had two people I really respect their opinions, who are very Orthodox driven, meaning like that's on their mind. How do I make, how do I become a better Orthodox Christian? This is on their mind. This is like, this is their goal. They're genuine about these things. They're very knowledgeable about a lot of things I'm not knowledgeable about. I'm not very knowledgeable about our faith as much as I should be. They are. I've also included a priest in some of the stuff, and some of their takes I was kind of hoping they wouldn't take. They're kind of like, you should be talking about some of these stuff more and be more direct. I want to know your opinion. Some people are like, well, you should tell people because, it might be helpful. I don't know, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. I might, depending on what people say or ask questions or whatever. So I did want to leave it in with this. Hopefully I'm guided to be able to say what's in my mind, in my heart, clear and concise, and careful that it's coming from the right place. I'm not black pilled, and neither should you be. There is no need to be black pilled, unless you're caught in the hamster wheel of news feeds, people's opinions, people's blah 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 blah. If you're caught in that, you're emotionally driven by those things. Your intention isn't with God first and foremost, being a good person. From that perspective, being a good member of your family and your community around you. If you're not looking into those things for those reasons, and you're not coming up with solutions to how to combat certain problems you see before you, then you need to think, in my opinion, I think you need to step back and walk yourself backwards and just zoom out a little bit and ask yourself, what's the point of all of this for myself, my family, my community, and members of the church? How do I get right with God? How do I apply, like all these things? I mean, I'm just telling you what I'm telling myself. I'm not preaching to you. Believe me. That is not the intention here. And I wouldn't do that. Like I got nothing to preach about. I'm a disaster, really. And those things there's no need to be black-pilled, because they're I've said it before. You could pick many books of the Bible and say, this is, if you just took out biblical references and references to God, you're like, this is a conspiracy book. We know these things are going to happen. We know these things are going to come. We need to have discernment. We need to have faith in each other, which is another reason why I don't want to go out there and say certain things, because then someone say, oh, he's disagreeing with this guy or this podcaster or this member of our community, which I'm not going to do. I don't want to do that. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's not my it's not what I do. It's not what I want to do. And what if I'm wrong about some stuff, right? Like, that's how I'm seeing it. And I'm just, sharing some of these ideas because a friend of mine, not me, I didn't say this. A friend of mine, I didn't say this. So this is not coming from me, please. I don't view myself this way. Believe me, if I did, I'd be presenting myself the last year very differently if I saw myself this way. I really don't see myself this way. But a friend of mine got me today, and which is why I kind of did some of this stuff. This person said, well, you've seen these things, you've learned these things, and you've called certain things. Maybe you need to say some of these things to these people because maybe you can shed some insight on some stuff, because you do have a good knowledge on certain subjects that you don't talk about, and maybe you should warn people about certain things. I don't know how right or wrong this person was, and I don't even know if I achieved that goal. But the reason why we shouldn't be black-pilled, and really we shouldn't be black-pilled, unless you're stopped looking for the truth, then you should be black-pilled. If you think you figured out the answer, then you should be black-pilled. If you have the answer, you should be black-pilled. If you are giving advice on these things, maybe check to see if you're right. But if you're looking for the truth, if you're looking for things within prayer for good discernment, to make good decisions, even as you're messing up, if you're doing that, if you're checking your ideas with other brothers and sisters that are part of our, Orthodox Christian world, also with people in the secular world that are not, that may have questions that lead there, if you're doing that and you're keeping an open mind and open ear, and if you're checking these things and ideas and thoughts with, of course, your spiritual father, conversations with clergy, if you can do that, and 100% for sure in prayer, and it's done earnestly, well then, I think from my experience and from what little I know about our faith, but definitely from my experience, those questions, that discernment, all that stuff comes to you somehow. I'm personally have to be careful about certain things, about like some bad traits I have, and I have to keep them in check. And then going to my spiritual father who knows some of those things, and by some, I don't know, maybe there's some that I haven't, or a few other people you have, they'll call me out on it. They'll say, you're overstepping it's vainglory, it's pride. So far, a lot of that has not happened in my world, and I check these things often, maybe too much. Maybe I overthink things too much, but the reason why we shouldn't be black-pilled is because if we actually earnestly, with all our hearts and all our beings, believe our faith, if we believe all those things, if we believe the saints and what they've said, if we believe the battle that's occurring, if we believe all that, and we're going into Lent, and we believe these attacks are going to come, if we believe all that stuff and we know that stuff and we with all our heart we believe that stuff, please forgive this example, but I think it's a good one, but I'm not trying to piss anybody off. It's the same as if you believe the Eucharist is real, why would you be afraid of the cooties on the spoon? Like, I have a hard time with that one. If you believe the Eucharist, if you believe all that, and it's a central focal point of what we believe, why would you need another spoon? Like, if you believe those things, if you honestly believe them, it's the blood and body of Christ. If that is something you believe with all your heart, why would you need another spoon for someone else? Why are you afraid of the cooties going in from your mouth? Why? Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. So if what I just said is true, and please correct me if I'm wrong with that statement, or forgive me if I've overstepped my thing, and I genuinely mean that. If there's a priest that heard me say that and I've done it, please let me know. And the first thing I will do is tomorrow I'll make a video taking back what I said, taking this. I will do that. But I think that that's true. If that's true, then what's coming and why you shouldn't be black-pilled is because of the same reason that you don't need another spoon, because that other spoon was in so-and-so's mouth and that person has cooties. If that's true, if that is true, and if we look at it that way, life that way, then someone, I'm thinking of like arguments people would give me. See, that's the virus. Why am I thinking that? Let me just finish this. If that's true, and we believe that to be true, then if we apply that same thinking to what's occurring around us on multiple levels, on multiple subjects, with multiple people, multiple countries, friends, families, relatives, like everybody, everything, everyone's just, they're all nuts. And we're going into Lent. It's going to get worse. It's going to get crazier for us. To Punchy's point in the Discord group, I think where she said it. If it's true, the spoon and the Eucharist, if you believe the Eucharist, body and blood of Christ, if those are not just words of metaphor, you don't need an extra spoon for anybody. You know what I mean? You just don't. And if that's true, and the world is going where it's going, and whatever is going to happen is what's going to happen, and you just keep proper, you keep your eyes, where there should be, I'm not telling you I'm doing any of this stuff. I'm just saying, if you believe all the stuff that's coming, and you're doing what you're doing your best to stick to your prayer rule, and do all that stuff that you should be doing, that I know I should be doing, and even when you mess up, you go back to all those things. You get back on the horse, as it's said over and over again. You go back to all that stuff. You will have discernment when it's needed. You will be able to put that spoon in your mouth and not worry about the cooties anybody has, because you know that medicine that you're getting is like God-given. You know that. If we know all these things, then, and we pray that we have the ability to discern better, we'll make better decisions. And the beauty is that if you're in a community of people that have the same sort of belief systems that we do, well, when you do make a mistake, your brother and your sister next to you will help you. I know that. I for sure I know that. I've seen it with this group. Like, I've seen it. I know that. I absolutely 100% know that. So just, let's keep some of these things in mind, and that a lot of these manipulative mind control, social engineering, culture creation tactics are from the devil. How about that? And look at it that way. That whether it's Bernays or whomever, the Tavistock Institute, or, whoever, Blavatsky, whoever, Crowley, whoever. You want to go to the Knights Templar? We touched upon quickly. The Knights of Malta. You want to go there? Go there. You want to go there? Go there. Whoever you want to pick, they're working with the dark side. I don't want any of that. And if you're working with the side of God and trying to get back to all that stuff that we're supposed to be doing, then we'll have better discernment. Then we'll be able to see when the situations get worse and what decisions to make and not to make. Then we'll know who to listen to when we're not sure who's making sense. And for those that are maybe they don't make sense, but there are other Orthodox brothers and sisters, we'll help them. If I'm one of those people saying the wrong thing, I know my brothers and sisters were going to help me get back on my feet, as long as I'm not an idiot and double down on something I was wrong about. If I'm right about something, they'll let me know. If I'm wrong about something, they'll let me know. But they're not going to let me fall. I know that. Like, I've seen you guys do this for each other. Like, I know that. I 100% I know that. So if these things are all true, then to me, it's like looking at the Eucharist. It's like the blood and body of Christ on a spoon being put in my mouth and me thinking, ew, what if like so-and-so's cooties gets on me? That I'm not going to do. Instead, I've never really thought that. Like, I've never thought that. Maybe it's because I grew up, a Greek kid in the church. It was not something I ever thought about until a non-Orthodox person came to the church. And he's like, ew. I was like, ew? What's ill? I didn't know what they were talking about. And they were just watching the process. And he's like, they're using one spoon. Oh, it's gross. Like that. I was thinking, what? It's gross. What do you mean? And then I was like, oh, they're looking at like, if I had a lollipop and I'm eating this lollipop, I'm like, here, you want this lollipop? And then everyone starts taking this lollipop and whatever, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, germ versus terrain theory, mano. Oh boy, that's a subject. I can't get into that right now. Yeah, that's a whole thing to go off. What did I miss in the chats? I went off. I haven't looked at this chats for hours. You got to say whoever. About whoever thinks that way about the spoon. Quite a few people, man. Orthodox people thought about that a couple of years ago. Man, honestly, I'm happy I didn't witness that like in a church, because I'm stupid like that. I probably would have not taken it well. Not now that I'm back to Orthodoxy, but at the time when that thing was happening, if I saw that, I would have lost it. And I wasn't even considering myself Orthodox. Removing the shares cup is no small thing. Yeah. It's crazy to you, Denise, because you're not crazy. To me, honestly, really, I bit my tongue saying this to a priest a couple months ago when they were making certain assertions about the certain decisions made during that time. I have had these conversations, just not publicly. And I was accused of a few things, wrongfully so. Like some things I was like, really? I don't think so. But I didn't really argue with this priest because I don't do that. I was raised not to do that. I was raised that if you disagree with a priest to like vehemently on stuff like this, unless it's a conversation you can have openly with the priest, just walk away and go look for advice elsewhere. And I bit my tongue when I was given I won't give their perspective, but they were just basically following orders is kind of where they were going with this. And they're kind of saying that people like myself and a number of other people out there created a divide within the community, and we are the reasons why there was problems in people's families on what decisions to make with the and all the other stuff that came with it. And I was like, really? I don't think so. I didn't say that. And then basically it was saying like because there was people that disagreed with certain decisions some jurisdictions made or some priests and bishops made, that we're the problem. We should just obey either way. And the one thing that came to my mind, the very first thing, the only thing that I wanted to say, but I didn't, was like, really, because I don't think the spoon thing fits with our views on the faith. But I left it at that. I bit my tongue and I just like, okay, well, I just will take my conversation elsewhere. The conversation ended really well. I'll just say that with the priest actually thanking me for the way I approached the subject. And gracious was the word used. So I didn't end it in a nasty, bad way. Let's see. Is there anything I should comment on in the chats? I'm not really even sure. Did any what I say make sense, guys? If you can, just let me know in the chats, like yes or no, or you're an idiot, or that was good, or whatever. I'm not sure what happened in the chats. A lot was said. I don't know if I don't know if we're going to go through all of it. Yeah. One last thing is like, I don't know how to walk the line between, I think it's okay to say this. My spiritual father has said worse on his own behalf. And I guess I would kind of be repeating what he's already said. So I don't think it's wrong. I mean, I've heard him say this on the Royal Path. And other interviews he's been on. So I think it's okay to say this. Yeah, because we're talking a little bit about like how do you walk the line between being honest and not being an ostrich and taking your head and putting it in the ground in the dirt and saying, oh, everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be fine, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be fine. Like what, I think it's very responsible of us, and it's where discernment comes from, and it's where we find out like what's going on, is to acknowledge truths, to acknowledge things that are occurring, to acknowledge that, yeah, this sucks over here, but that's where it is. What you do with that information, that perspective matters 100% for sure, right? But like, avoiding it and taking an ostrich approach is not, in my opinion, healthy mentally, physically, or spiritually. When I say spiritually, of course, I mean perspective of the Orthodox Church. I tried to find out some of the criticisms people had of Elder Ephraim, and I was like, what? Really? Like, this is crazy. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Some of the things I've said is like, so then is Saint Paisios a conspiracy theorist? Is Father Seraphim Rose, are they conspiracy theorists? Is the Book of Revelation conspiracy theory? Like, what's up here, right? So like, how do we go from like seeing things that they're telling us or have told us, Cosmas o tolos, Saint Cosmas, like seeing what they're describing from the past and seeing it happening now and pointing that out, I think is important. And then what you do with your life and how you go about things is equally as important. And I think that I was talking about my spiritual fathers, like, how do I walk the line of like sharing some of these things and pointing things out, but at the same time, not either turning people off and having them think that I'm like, they agree with me on this, but you know what I mean? And people will just like, screw him, he was cool, but like that kind of thing. Or like, I'm pro so-and-so and he's not, oh, he's a jerk. Like, how do you avoid like that's nonsense occurring? Because it's just, to me, that doesn't help the conversation. And like, what do I share? What do I not share? How do I like do this? And I just don't know how, man. I just see some things dropped in the comments. I'm just going to comment on this and hopefully wrap this up. Brody says, mentioning terrain theory and the black nobility in one video. Welcome to Shadow Band Land. I didn't talk about my opinions on that one theory. I think you guys can guess where I fall. I honestly, on some subjects, I had strong opinions on for a long time, and then I retracted some of them, and I kind of sit in the land of I don't know, but I do know the conventional story makes no sense. But I also do know how they play games with going from one extreme to the other. Good example is how many people that woke up in the last couple years are doubling down on things that they've just figured out and just been notified because they just woke up, and they're doubling down on thinking everything's a conspiracy theory. Everything's a conspiracy theory with, like, I'm tired of it. Not every cloud is chemtrails. Like, please leave me alone with you just got into this subject and you think every cloud is chemtrails. You think every time it's colder than it should be, it's, you know, like, some of it's true. So, okay, I know that. Trust me. Like when they start arguing with me, oh, there's seed clouds. I'm like, buddy, are you kidding me? I know this. I've known this for a long time. So people just end up doing all that. And they're like, oh, NASA's fake and this and that. The world must be flat. You know, and then some flat earth guys might bring up some subject and then go, well, there's these weird things in the globe theory too, which are true. And then I'm just like, I don't know. At this point, I don't know where I sit on a couple things. I do know what's definitely not true, right? So the germ terrain theory, it's a little bit more clear to me than some other subjects I'm kind of like iffy on that I just haven't invested any time in lately because I just don't want to go down that road just right now, like flat earth versus round earth thing, whatever. The terrain theory versus germ theory, I'm a lot closer to having an opinion on than some other things. I bring up Weston Price. I'd bring up like some things about the jaw and how it's evolved, the de-evolved. Why is that the case? I'd bring up a lot of these things that aren't exactly things that fit in with terrain theory versus germ theory, but I will bring them up and say, well, you know what? The people that had these opinions on certain things about evolution that people were calling crazy were actually accurate about a lot of stuff. In terms of that kind of stuff fits in very well with one of the two theories, and it's not the terrain theory. And I've always been not a big fan of that one, whatever, but I'll stay out of that. Anyways. Christina's asking what that theory is. I'll stay out of that one. I think Brody will probably explain that. Moldy joining Extinction Rebellion and glued himself to all right, Crispy, I could see him doing that. That all you missed since the start of the stream. Pretty much, that's true. Brody's saying, oh yeah, he's explaining it to her. What? Nudge unit files must be exposed. I agree. Clump. Welcome, by the way. Welcome, Clump. Follow your thinking. It's a problem needs clarity. Thanks for focusing on it. I didn't really focus too much on it. I just brought it up. I don't know if I'll be having further conversations on these things or to what degree I'll go into detail. But I think a lot was said in the stream. So again, if you're just tuning in now, maybe it's worth going back and checking it out. Manuel is here. What's up, brother, man? I need to find a way to contact you so that we can figure out how to meet up here in Mexico, my brother. If that's something that interests you, let me know what the best way to do that is. Excellent comment. Yes. Let's be open to see the lies. But that doesn't mean we see the truth. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You summed up a lot of what I was trying to say here. Thank you. And also, let's keep in mind that these social engineers are far better at this than they didn't forget how to manipulate you, my dear friends. My dear brothers and sisters, they didn't automatically forget. And believe me, please, no amount of individuals in quote-unquote supposed politics are going to stop the original, actual, legitimate, real governing bodies of this planet, the ruling elite. And let's remember who's the prince of this realm. Well, let's not forget that. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's pretty clear. Those individuals didn't forget how to control you. Those individuals are not going to let you choose your way out of destroying their plans. Choose to change their plan. You're not going to do that this way. You are going to do that with the examples I gave you, the secular examples I gave you, the truckers, Occupy. Those are legitimate tariff. You want to go back to the 60s on that one too. The original anti-war movement, and which is why they got it all. Anyways, I think I'm going to end this. You guys know where I'm going. I'm just going to go from one ramble to another one. I hope this all made sense. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope everyone's okay with what I have said. I agree. Excellent comment. Oh, you already said that. I'm just seeing. RLA was off, but Mexico meetup. Let's do a Mexico meetup. I highlighted the deleted ones. Oh, that might have been Manny. Jim Bob, I'm saying at the end with God is good. I have no idea if Jim Bob was here the whole time. I'm going to doubt that very much. But anyways, if you guys are jumping in at the end and trying to figure out what I'm talking about, I covered a lot of stuff from... just go back and check it out if you want this rant. It's my reasons for not giving a lot of opinions on subjects that a lot of people are asking about, whether it's geopolitics, social engineering, culture creation, and all that stuff, and what's going on with the blah, blah, blahs in the world of blah, blah, blah. Anyways, brothers, yes, Blue Skittles, the stream is going, and it's over now, though. I have noticed that Jim Bob does the lurking thing, and I kind of like that. He lurks in some streams. I do the lurking thing too from time to time, and it's really cool and interesting because you can kind of see some people's ways. But yeah, he was lurking in one communist lady talking about some socialist, I don't know, James Lindsay thing, and we're both trying to figure. Anyways, I did notice Jim Bob lurks, and I think it's a good one. Today was no lurk. It's okay, man. It was just a jabbering session. I don't know. I think it would be one I would recommend to people like yourself more than others because I kind of jumped around a lot, but whatever. Word to Big Bird, guys. I'm out. I think I'm done. Tune in tomorrow for SOS Radio. Proper, legit, no jabber, like this one was. Again, send me some comments. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree on the mind control stuff that I'm talking about, being lied to, being the delusional stuff, the stuff that I talked about from here. You know what I mean? That paragraph I kept repeating over and over again. I'm going to actually read that one last time just because it's an important to know. And I apologize for those that heard me read it over and over and over again today, whatever day it is. And then I'm going to call it a Jiggy Jang Day. Every aspect of the mental and... let me start again. Every aspect of the mental and psychological life of people on the planet was profiled, recorded, and stored into computer systems. Above, the closely cooperating groups of social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, think tanks, and foundations preside the elite of powerful members of the oligarchy comprised mostly of the old Venetian black nobility. What is the purpose of these behavior modifications, you may ask? It is to bring about forced change to our way of life without our agreement and without even realizing what is happening to us. The ultimate goal being the complete extirpation of mankind's inner sense of identity and the tearing out of mankind's innermost soul and the placement in the vacant space of an artificial, synthetic pseudo-soul. However, in order to change mankind's behavior away from industrial production into spiritualism and to bring us willfully into the world of post-industrial era, zero growth, zero progress, One must force first a change in mankind's self-image, its fundamental conceptions of what we are. Thus, the image of man, appropriate to the new era, must be sought, synthesized, and wired into mankind's brain. All right. The ultimate solution to all of the things that we talked about, illustrated exceptionally well in Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphus, one of his recent videos, where it's entitled something like "The Enemy of the New World Order is Orthodox Christianity," something like that. That is the antidote. That is the solution to all the problems that we're seeing. All the illusory narratives out there, all of the BS. The solution is that. Church. Word to Big Bird. Take it easy, boys and girls. Thanks for listening to my rant. If you tuned in at the end and you're interested in anything I was saying, this might be one of the few I would suggest go back and rewatch halfway through and let me know what you think. And I apologize for the confusion that I bring almost always. And I'm encouraged to do more of that. Don't know why. Even my spiritual father, Father Turbo, told me that. Word to Big Bird. See you guys. Maybe tomorrow, SOS Radio. Adios.
This is Bobby Biggie. Bobby. You're watching. You're no more.